There we go.
Good morning again, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment meeting for Friday, February the 17th, 2023. This morning, there's a meeting scheduled for 2 consent applications and 3 minor variance applications. There's also 1 application not subject to a public meeting to request a change of conditions to an approved consent application. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be followed for the meeting. First, the Secretary Treasurer will advise the committee as to when, how, and to whom notice of each of the hearings was circulated for the applications being considered. Next, each of the applications will be considered separately. Planning staff will advise as to the purpose and effect of each application and provide any additional information that might be relevant. Following that, the Secretary Treasurer will summarize any correspondence on file, and from there, the applicant may make a brief presentation if they so choose. The public will also be given an opportunity to speak to the applications. After the public forum, we'll bring the application before the committee for any questions or concerns, and then we will deliberate on the proposed applications and consider a motion to either pass, defeat, or defer the decision for the applications. The consent applications being considered this morning are B22-11 for 908 Hungary Bay Road, B22-19 for 253 South Bay Road. The minor variance applications being considered are for A22-20 for 865 Kings Farm Road, A22-18 for 161 West Shore Road, and A21-32 for 8 Islands 3480 in Georgian Bay. And the report not subject to a public meeting is B21-08 for 20506 Georgian Bay Shore. Before we begin, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, I will read the motion for accepting of today's agenda. Be it moved by Tony Schmidt and seconded by Member Jarvis. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves the minutes we're adopting the minutes, approves the minutes of January 20th, 2023 as circulated. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. The motion is carried. Our next motion is the resolutions for the acceptance of the or adopting of the agenda for today's meeting. It's moved by Member Matthews, seconded by Member Rivet. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment adopts the agenda dated February 17th, 2023. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. And the motion is carried. Madam Secretary.
Notice of each of the applications was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Including in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may also be provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, good morning. The application, we have a recommendation. It's different than what is in front of council committee this morning. We recommend that the application be deferred pending some legal review of title on some of the properties. When we initially reviewed it, we thought title to all three chunks was all in the same name, and it's apparently that it is not, which means we need to sort that out before we can move forward with the application. Can't hear you.
Okay, our next application is B 22-19 for 253 South Bay Road. To the planner, please.
Gathering my thoughts, sorry. As you said, Mr. Chair, B 2219 253 South Bay Road, an application for consent by Edmund Remazki. I always like to start with the pictures to give us an idea of where we're at. This is the general location of the property, and the green on this particular map are wetlands, and the road is the district South Bay Road itself. The picture you have here and in your package is the survey of the property, and you can see where the deviation of the road actually comes into play. And in this particular case, it's also showing the severance parcels being part 2 being the one part, and part 1 being the other part. So those are the two pieces, one in the bottom right-hand corner. All the parts on the roadway are the parts under discussion with the district in terms of transfer of roadway so that it will finally come off of Mr. Remazki's property and be transferred legally to the district. In that particular case, Mr. Remazki has been working with the district quite a bit and trying to get, address not their concerns, but to be a benefit overall to the district by agreeing to the transfer of the roadways. And though it can be also a good idea for Mr. Remazki, but it's certainly to the benefit overall of the district and to road users that the district have full control and ownership of the roadway. In terms of the buildings and properties, the buildings on the property, we did take a look at, even though there was not a real property survey provided to show the exact location of all the buildings, we are confident that all the buildings that are going to be on the one part will be fully within the boundaries of the severed, and the zoning bylaw, if consent is approved, will recognize existing locations of the buildings and structures. The site photos show you can see the curvature in the roadway through this particular area, which is where the deviation comes into play. And the other photos are shots of the Remazki property itself and the various buildings and structures that are on the property at this time. So the application proposes to sever one new lot with a retained portion. As I mentioned, District Road 48 deviated on the property for many years, and severance will require a transfer of roadways as a condition. The requirement for an EIS has been waived since there is no development proposed for the lands adjacent to the EPW zoning. And we have actually added a recommendation that the buffer area be included around the wetlands, just to make sure that we're not doing any development in the future on the EPW or within the EPW setback areas. The site survey, including building locations, has also been waived. I mean, we're working with the district for many months, on this roadway, and at no time was it was a mention to Mr. Remazki that he needed to have the building surveyed. And to send him back out again after all the times he's paid for the surveyor, because it's been at his cost so far, we thought was a little bit over the top. So we are able to deal with the location of the buildings in a different way, and we are confident that the buildings, as I showed on the one map, will be fully within the severed area. As I mentioned, the condition of consent will require a zoning bylaw amendment to implement multiple requirements on the severed and the retaining lands. And we're also recommending in this particular case, with the dedication of roadway to the district, that the parkland dedication fees or dedication of parkland be waived. The proposal is to sever a 3.1 acre parcel and to retain a 14.6 hectare parcel in the rural designation. The survey that I showed you, the part 2 is the smaller one, and the part 1 is the bigger one. Both of them have frontage onto South Bay Road. The district official plan calls it a rural designation. It's on a district class B roadway, and I mentioned there are wetlands on the property. Township official plan is also rural, district class B, and the other wetland. There are no water bodies or sensitive water bodies in terms of lakes on the property. The zoning on the severed is RU and environmental protection wetland, and on a retained is also RU, but that would be changed when we get to the zoning stage in order to update those. There's private water and septic, and again, the district road 48 is the access. Under the provincial policy, again, this is a rural area. Rural area policies in the PPS are quite broad and lenient. One thing that should have been mentioned here, of course, was that the PPS does have significant natural constraints and natural heritage and species of risk clauses within it, but that was also going to be reviewed under the district official plan and the township official plan. So as I mentioned, in the district official plan, we're designated rural on this Class B roadway, wetland Schedule 2 for natural heritage, and an Appendix D has a generalized wildland fire hazard risk of moderate to high. The section of the district official plan we looked at, J3, goes through some of the natural heritage issues overall. The lot itself is actually a subdivided lot from the original crown. It's not 100 acres, obviously in size. It's not a large intact. And even the parcel sizes that we're predicting or proposing here are not small residential lots that are beginning to take away from the natural area size and amenities of the area. We don't see any need for any hard or soft services in the area. It's a short driving distance to Honey Harbor for this new lot, if there's ever a house built on the new portion. And again, the constraints we can talk about in a minute. The district Class B roadway section requires all new lots that front on a district roadway to have a minimum lot frontage on the road of 135 meters. Both the severed and retained will meet the requirement. And the natural heritage policies state that development and site alteration should not be permitted on adjacent lands to the natural heritage features. And we're proposing again that the wetlands be buffered by an additional distance in order to make sure that no future development is allowed in that area unless there's an EIS that goes forward. We're also able in the district official plan to waive the requirements of an EIS. In this particular case, when we take a look at, we're not doing a subdivision. We're not doing a golf course. We're not doing condominium development. We're proposing 2 lots. One of those lots is already developed with a single dwelling on it. And the second lot, their zoning will only allow for a single dwelling on it. So it's not a major development in the area. In that regard, we believe that the EIS outside of those areas surrounding the wetlands would not be required. One of the tricky parts to this is the Appendix D, the wildland fire hazard risk. And that classifies this property as a moderate to high risk. And I have to tell you, this Appendix D in the district official plan is quite a work of art. When you if you were to go on to the district website today and take a look at the district official plan policies, number one, there's no GIS of them. You have to take a look at it on paper. I have to use a PDF in order to take a look at district official plan, and that's a bit sad in this day and age. The other thing is that the current official plan on the district website is a 2019 consolidation. It has not been consolidated since then. And the way it's set up, and this is, sorry, just a little bit of a narrative, if you'll bear with me. The way that the district official plan is set up is that, the document is there, it's a PDF. And attached to that are the schedules, which are the legal schedules. And attached to the schedules is this Appendix D that's prepared by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry for wildland fire hazard. Well, if you were to go on the website today, you would find the version that goes back to 2019. Okay. But when we circulated the application to the district, the map they sent me was a 2021 version. I'm thinking, well, where did this come from? Well, it seems that the district can change the wildland fire hazard risk map at any time they want. Every time the ministry updates a map, they can just change it. You can go on the website today and take a look at your property. It could be low. You could go back on Tuesday and it could be high. And they don't, and because it's an appendix, it's not an amendment to an official plan. But they expect rules and so on and so forth to be applied to it in the same way we would to any other designation on an official plan, if you're familiar with the concept. So I'm not happy with the way it's being done. And Mr. Remazki, unfortunately, his property in this particular case falls into the high risk. So we are adding into his zoning that at the time the other property is developed, the one that's being severed, that they have to do a small fire hazard risk. And that hazard risk is outlined in the attachment to your report. It is not it can be done by an individual. You don't need to hire a biologist. You don't need to hire a wildland fire person or a firefighter to do it. It is basically an individual's assessment of their property to say, listen, I live in a forested area. It could be a high fire risk area. What can I do around my house or how I build my house in order to be safer? So that's what our recommendation is, to deal with the high risk in this particular case. I'm in the opinion that the application as we put forward to you and the various constraints that we put on the property conforms with the intent of the district of Muskoka official plan. The township official plan goes through very, very much the same issues with the natural environment and so on and so forth. And again, as I noted, I recommend the EIS and impact assessment be waived, and I offer the following. All landowners are responsible for ensuring that critical habitat is not destroyed and endangered species risk are not impacted when they are working, building on their lands. It doesn't matter whether or not you're in front of this committee for an approval or whether or not you want to get a building permit on an already zoned piece of property. Those are the law. That is the law. That is the law that applies to everybody. The cost of meeting the township official plan policies fall inordinately more costly on owners of large properties that are proposing small scale limited development. The size of these properties and how much it would cost to go through an EIS for a single house, because that's all the zoning would allow, is a bit too much. The property in question is 43.8 acres in size. The cost to engage in a consultant would be high considering its size. The owner proposes the creation of one lot that would be used for rural purposes, essentially the potential for a new detached dwelling and accessory buildings. The application is not proposing a new subdivision, aggregate operation, trailer park, condominium. The potential development falls towards the low end of the potential impact scale. And there is sufficient room outside of the wetlands and the lands adjacent to the wetlands to build without even have to go near them. There may be species of risk on the property, but as I said, that is a requirement for all of us as landowners, no matter where we live in Ontario, to have regard for that when we build and not to destroy habitat. And just to force them to an EIS in order to say that there is habitat or not is the same thing a next door neighbor would have to do. I've also, again, proposed constraints and limitations on the range of permitted uses can be placed on the property through appropriate zoning. Overall, again, we reviewed the transportation policies, the district road policies. The minimum lot area is slightly below what the township requires, but there is some interpretation that can be put in there. It's very, very close. He's not significantly undersized. Overall, when we take a look at the various things, including the parkland, parkland dedication is recommended to be waived in this particular case. Again, the reason I mentioned that is that the dedication of roadway to the district, I think, should suffice in this particular case. Overall, in the opinion that the application does conform with the general intent of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. The comprehensive zoning bylaw, as again I mentioned, currently zoned rural. There needs to be some minor things that will be done in a site-specific amendment that will implement the recommendations that we put in the front end of this particular consent. Overall, based on a review of the policies, I recommend approval of the application on the basis that the proposal complies with the PPS, conforms to the district and municipal official plans, and maintains the intent of the zoning bylaw. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One letter of no objection was received from Hydro One, and one letter of no objection was received from the District of Muskoka, provided that the appropriate development control techniques are used to direct future development and site alteration outside of areas identified natural heritage feature and areas of high wildland fire potential, and that their recommendations are implemented as conditions of consent.
Thank you. Is the applicant present? And would you care to add anything to what the planner has mentioned so far?
No, I think you read it in great depth. I think it's very straightforward, simple application.
Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public portion of this form and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we will begin with Member Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Tom. Good to see you, by the way, in person.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly make an observation to our planner that Appendix D, right? That's the wildfire. Yeah, that I think Tom and other members of this committee may remember that thing all of a sudden reared its ugly head about 2 years ago. We hadn't seen anything on any applications that reference wildfires at all until about 2 years ago. Now, I presume that was just somebody at district realizing this appendix existed, decided to start applying it. So it's kind of bizarre when we first saw it. Having said that, I just need some clarification. It's lot, let's go down here, lot 2, right? That is being the severed, is a severed lot? Part 2, rather?
Bear with me for 1 minute again.
That's the one with the buildings on it.
The retained, so
Yeah.
the severed is the 3.1 hectares, the smaller, yes.
It's a smaller one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I presume the owner just cedes that part of the property that is roadway. Is there any sort of leeway on, like, is there shoulder area and other area that becomes the responsibility of the district as well?
So the district will be getting everything that it needs, both the severed and the retained.
Okay.
So everything that they've asked for, I believe Mr. Remazki has agreed to, and sent out surveyors twice to
Okay.
deal with their concerns.
Okay, then the 3.1 hectares of the severed property, that it takes into account all the lands that the district is going to be needing for the roadway. The severed lot is 3.1 hectares. That's taking into consideration everything that's being given to the district for the road.
I believe so. When we took a look at the survey, the parts identified
Yeah.
in the corner, those numbers separately from the parts of the roadway, if you know what I mean.
Okay. And as I understand it, our normal minimum lot area requirement is 10 hectares. So we're allowing the 3.1 in this case, correct? That's part of the severance agreement?
Yes. Yeah, and that will be dealt with through the zoning side of things.
which is fine. Okay. I think that's all I needed. Thank you.
Member Rivet, please.
That was quite a complicated planning matter that you put your arms around, and I have absolutely no problems with your recommendations. Thank you.
Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can completely understand Mr. Remazki's request to remove his liability. Just a point of curiosity, did you end up donating the land as a gesture of kindness to the district, or?
You could say it that way, I guess. Yeah.
Okay,
There's no real financial gain from it.
right. Okay, that it just clarifies that then the road is now the district's and not yours, right?
Well, not yet. but soon.
It will be, yes. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Member Matthews. Member Schmidt.
I think this is a good example of the district, the township, and the applicant all working together. Hate to use the term common sense, but it seems like there was a lot of that here, and glad that it's coming toward a result for everybody. Thanks for the planner's time and everybody.
Thank you, Member Schmidt. Member Predko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one quick question for Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith, you were talking about putting the hold on for the fire issue. But in your discussion, you didn't mention which part 1 or part 2. Could you just clarify that it's only the part without the larger parcel without dwelling on it currently, or did you recommend putting the hold on both pieces?
So page 2, page 20 of your agenda are the recommendations in terms of this particular consent. And in that page has the zoning bylaw, and I believe the last bullet point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the retained part be subject to the holding at the time of building permit application, to be removed at the time of building permit application upon the completion of the Fire Smart Canada assessment card. So it's on the
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Predko. If there are no further questions or comments, I will read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment hereby grants provisional approval to consent application B22-19 for the severance of a new lot as shown as Part 2 on Schedule A attached to this decision, and subject to the following conditions. A, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from the Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to the application. B, that the owner enter into an agreement with the township pursuant to Section 51, subsection 26 of the Planning Act, if deemed necessary by the Township Planning Department to satisfy all of the requirements, financial or otherwise, of the township, which may include, but shall not be limited to, the provision of roads, installation of services, facilities, drainage, and the timing and payment of a development charge for the severed and/or retained parts. C, that payment of any or all parkland dedication fees or the requirement to dedicate lands for parkland be waived. D, that the owner enter an agreement with the District of Muskoka pursuant to Section 51, subsection 26 of the Planning Act, if deemed necessary by the District of Muskoka, to satisfy all the requirements, financial or otherwise, of the District of Muskoka, which may include, but shall not be limited to, transfer of road widening, installation of services, facilities, drainage, location of wells, and the timing and payment of a development charge for the severed and/or retained parts. And E, that the clerk of the township provide written confirmation that a zoning bylaw amendment is in force and effect that limits the permitted uses on the severed and retained lots, Dwelling detached or detached dwelling, accessory buildings, structures and uses, home occupation, home industry, and bed and breakfast on both the severed and retained parts, and recognizes deficiencies in the lot area for the severed part, recognizes the current location of buildings and structures on the severed part of the as of the date of the bylaw coming into force and effect, with requirements that all future development conform to the provisions of the bylaw at that time, and includes a 30-meter buffer area around the existing EPW zoning to preclude any possible future development in the adjacent land area on both the severed and retained lots, subject to the submission and peer review of an environmental impact study, and the remaining part be subject to H holding to be moved at the time of building permit application upon the completion and submission to the Township Planning Department of a Fire Smart Canada Fire Smart Home Ignition Assessment Scorecard that indicates the development will achieve a target hazard level of moderate or better. That a reference plan survey that is registered be completed and a digital copy and a hard copy be filed with the Township Planning Department, or an exemption from the reference plan be received by the registrar. And finally, that pursuant to section 53, subsection 42 of the Planning Act, that the certificate of consent be affixed to the deed within 2 years of the giving of notice of decision. Note that section 53, subsection 43 of the Planning Act requires that the transaction approved by this consent must be carried out within 2 years of the issuance of the certificate, i.e. stamping of the deed. All those in favor, please signify by raising their hand. Yes, back to, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Precco. The motion is carried. Our next application is a minor variance application for number A22-20 for 865 Kings Farm Road. To the planner, please.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. I'll have to restart. You want me to restart? Okay, not a problem. No. Round two. For the tape version. Mr. Chair, application A22-20 for the Woerners. The applicants propose to construct a ramp, dock, and boat port that exceeds the recommended length. The reason for this case is that the lake water depth in front of this property is 1 meter or less until you get approximately 12 meters offshore, therefore not providing sufficient depth to dock a boat safely or without damage to the hull. The owners are hereby notified that a permit from Parks Canada, Trans-Severn Waterway may be required, and it's my understanding they've already reached out to them for that particular discussion. There are no natural feature or fish habitat impacts anticipated from this application. In terms of the property itself, this map here shows its relative location in terms of Little Go Home Bay into the Gloucester Pool. As you can see, it's out of the main channel area or the main travel portion, but there is enough travel between these two within the channel area itself where they propose it to have some concerns. It's also possible you can take a look at this as a narrow water channel, water body under the official plan, but the distances between the property and the islands exceed that, so it doesn't fall into that particular category. This air photo of the property, you can see adjacent to house and a little bit of idea of the property. This was taken before the current building was erected. This one here, buildings and structures, show in red, two parts in red. The red building on the upper part is already existing. It's not part of this application. And then the proposed boat port area and the dock. This is one of two diagrams that show the proposal itself. And as I mentioned on here, proposed 26 by 32 dock and boat port with a 38 by 4 access ramp over shallow rock. And then a blow up of the boat port and rampant area itself in terms of its proposed architectural and construction drawings. So the site characteristics, we currently have a single detached dwelling with attached decks on the property. It does slope somewhat towards the water, which is common in many of the parts of Georgian Bay where the water level is quite a bit lower, or in some cases a lot lower, down towards the lake shore. Not a lot in this particular case, but it does go down. The budding properties are all zoned shoreline residential SR1 with detached recreational dwellings, although the lands to the northeast are zone crown land. Planning data. District official plan has a waterfront. There is natural heritage within 120 meters to the closest point of the property to a PSW. In this particular case, the Little Go Home Bay wetland. Archaeological potential is high to very high. And again, we mentioned the Trent Severn waterway is on the district official plan also. Township official plan and constraints is similar. Waterfront, section F25 private docks applies. Section D24 Trent waterway applies. Appendix D, adjacent to fish habitat type 2 applies, and the Little Go Home Bay is a moderate to sensitive water body. Zoning, as I mentioned, is SR1, and abutting is SR1, private septic and water, and it does have a private road access. In this particular case, we didn't receive any comments. I didn't receive any comments back when this was written from Parks Canada. The township deputy clerk did note that the shore road allowance in this particular case does not need to be purchased. It may look funny on some of our drawings or some of the schedules, but it's already been sold and does not need to be purchased or license of occupation. So, provincial policy statement: these lands are rural, as is probably every single square inch of the township, and the rural land does allow for this type of development. The PPS doesn't specifically talk about boat ports and ramps and docks, but it certainly does, again, as I mentioned before, talk about natural constraints and the environment and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about those in a minute. But overall, it is consistent with the rural policies of the PPS. The 4 tests of the minor variance is what we have to pass. And we look at the official plans in both cases. The district official plan, we take a look at the ramp, the dock, and the boat port will be located outside the 120 meters to the PSW. It's way down the bottom of the hill. The PSW is on the other side of the road, so we don't have any concerns about that. C152 environmental impact study states that where a study impacts a natural heritage site, which is the Trent Severn, that sometimes a EIS needs to be required depending on the type of development. Doesn't translate into that for a ramp, dock, and boat port in this particular case. Lake Health System establishes the framework for the district's lake health program. We're on Little Go Home Bay. It's deemed to be moderate sensitive water body. We don't anticipate any issues with water quality or whatever it is, again, from this particular change or minor variance. The archaeological potential, we're high to very high archaeological potential. Pretty much everything that is on the lakes is high to moderate. And the only time we seem to get into actual archaeological potential is when we haven't had significant disturbance. So more so when we talk about the house than we talk about the dock. So when you have existing cottages that have been around for years, we've had disturbance. It's pretty tough to find archaeological remains in these particular locations. And also, especially when we have bedrock that's close to surface, not a lot of soil, all the rest of it, finding archaeological remains is that haven't been disturbed or eliminated is pretty on the low end in that regard. Some of the bigger properties where we actually have a lot of upland area that may be part of an application, yeah, it certainly has maybe some of that potential, but not when we get, I think, down to these somewhat smaller properties where significant disturbance, land grading, and so on and so forth has been done over many years. So in that regard, we don't see an archaeological assessment being of any need or not required. Overall, I'm of the opinion that the minor variance does maintain the general intent and purpose of the district official plan. We also have to test it against the township official plan policies. And then again, in this particular case, we have a waterfront designation. This type of structures, so on and so forth, are permitted within that. F25 provides direction on private docks. And it says that the zoning bylaw is where you should be taking a look at for the particular numbers for length, width, so on and so forth. The little Go Home Bay's wetland is, the width in this particular case, narrow water bodies is 200 meters to the nearest islands, 300 meters all the way across. So the narrow water bodies policies do not apply. Trent Severn Waterway, again, we've included a condition in this particular case that they do get their permit or whatever, or waiver from Parks Canada if it's required. Fish habitat is a fish habitat type 2 in this particular area, and that overall the official plan is quite lenient in those type of habitats. There isn't, as opposed to the fish habitat type 1s where spawning, breeding, vegetation, feeding, and all the rest of it is quite important. So we don't require an impact assessment in type 2 fish habitats. Natural state shoreline is also very important, with a target of 75% of the linear shoreline to be maintained. I think when we take a look at some of the pictures, you'll see that they've been lucky that the properties have been bought have retained a significant amount of shoreline vegetation in this particular property. And even the pathways are definitely within the requirements, I think, of the township bylaw. So we don't see any more natural shoreline issues with this particular property. There is some potential for disturbance considering you need to get down, but we don't see it as being any long-term negative impacts. Overall, in the opinion of the minor variance, maintains the general intent of the township official plan. The second test is maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. And here we can take a look at this table for this particular table and the two variances that are required. One is the maximum height for the boat port itself, and the 4113IH maximum projection of docks is the second one that the variance is required for. And in this particular case, it's also one in terms of this particular section of the zoning bylaw. It requires a variance for 6.34 acres. So overall, what we're getting here is a dock projection, as you can see, that goes out with sufficient depth for the boat mooring. We're seeing this a lot more often, and you've probably seen them over the last couple of years too, with changes in water depths and so on and so forth on those lakes that don't necessarily have a well-regulated water depth. So anything on the Georgian Bay side and all the rest of it. We're seeing applications for dredging that doesn't come through here because it's an M&R issue. We've had people talk about, dock projections. What else can they do? It's either we force them into mooring offshore and into some kind of little punt in order to get back, or we take a look at options, which is the extension. The extension into, a lot of the busier waterways and all the rest of it, or narrow water bodies, it's certainly going to be a problem. But when we have, I believe, enough room in terms of the channel area here, that's not going to disturb or impact on boat traffic overall, then there's, I think, some leeway here. You got to take a look also as, what is the worst option in some respects? Is it better to go with a dock projection or have more and more applications for dredging and so on and so forth that don't go through us at all? Is it the lesser of two evils? I don't know, but in this particular case, the applicants here are requesting these particular variances. Overall, the small variance proposed for the boat port height will not be noticeable by the public. And it's interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about our zoning bylaw. Our zoning bylaw requires the boat port height to be measured from the high water mark. So not the watermark that you go out there today to build, but from a high water mark, which is, well, let's say the water level is here, and the high water mark is up here. So the The builder has to take his stick and stick it up here, which means that the boat port actually looks higher than it is from the water level. And we can't even force that because when the water level goes down some more, it's gonna be out of compliance anyways. So some of the things that we are required to take a look at, it's a good idea to have a boat port height. But the way we measure some things with fluctuating water levels is somewhat problematic. In some respects, it probably should be measured from the top of a dock, which is a fixed structure, which gives you a relationship between the dock and the top of the boat port, as opposed to a water level. Because if the dock is fixed and the water level keeps on going down, it's like, okay, then we just have to get the boat port higher and higher and higher. So there are some funky things that go on at times with some of our ways of doing business that we may need to take a look at. That's sorry, was on this side. So overall, I think these variances that are proposing here are meet the general intent of the bylaw. The appropriate and desirable development. This test refers to appropriateness of development given the existing conditions of the property, and if it's in keeping with the interest of the community and the public. The applicant will continue to maintain all the trees and all the rest of it. So screening for the house, got nothing to do with that. We don't see any further navigation, character, or environmental impacts from this particular proposal. Additionally, the nature of the shallow rocky shoreline necessitates to shift further away from the shoreline in order to allow for safe boating and so on and so forth. And if you consider that boating is one of the major characteristics of cottage life, that there aren't too many other options, as I mentioned already. I am of the opinion that the minor variance is appropriate and desirable development for the subject lands. Be minor in nature. This refers to the overall developments. And if it's considered minor in nature, the test is not merely numerical. We don't do, if you're over 50%, it's not minor. If it's over 100%, it's not minor. We may take a look at it more through the determination of impact. You can have a minor variance that has 155% deviation, and it can still be minor in nature. You may not agree with the numbers minor, but the impacts and so on and so forth. The size and location of the proposed ramp, dock, and boat partner in response to continued water changes. Where water levels are not regulated, property owners will continue to experience difficulties when and if water levels continue to drop. Whereas while it is possible the water levels will rise again in the future, the application does not need to be reviewed in light of does need to be reviewed in light of the current circumstances, not what it's going to be like in 5, 10, or 15 years, higher or lower. Okay. Well, a dock suitable for mooring a boat is not essential to continued use of the property. Docks are considered to be an important part of the lake experience. Alternatives to a dock extension, such as offshore mooring or dredging a lake bottom to increase water depth, are not viable or always environmentally friendly options. There are no anticipated negative impacts to the navigation, character, or natural heritage of surrounding areas, and no removal of existing vegetation is proposed. I am of the opinion that the development is minor in nature. Overall, staff recommend approval of the application on the basis the proposal complies with PPS and meets the 4 tests of the minor variance.
No correspondence has been received.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that the applicant is present, and if you have some additional comments that you'd like to add to what the planner provided already, I would ask that you step up to the microphone that we have placed here and give us your name and address.
Yes, my name is Eric Woerner. Address here is at 65 Kings Farm Road. So at this point in time, I don't have any comments. The planner's done an excellent job of covering all points of this argument, and I thank him for that. So at this time, no, I don't have any additional comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and hopefully you'll be available for some questions. I noticed that we have a number of members of the public attending the meeting via Zoom. And I will attempt to bring you into the meeting. I see there's a Mr. Jeff Stevens. Did you have a question for the applicant or for the planner?
I do, and thank you very much for allowing us to have this opportunity. Eric, we're neighbors. Nice to meet you. Look forward to meeting you in person rather than on Zoom. Just a couple concerns with this, and I'm not one to get in the way of people enjoying their property. We have a boathouse ourselves, so I'm pro boathouse. My concern is our property at 842 looks out directly towards your property on the left of us, if you're looking out into the bay. And coming out 70 feet is going to be quite constructive and destructive to our view. Now, listen, I understand people buy property and things happen, but you are asking for a major variance in compared to the 26-foot sort of limits that are imposed right now with the bylaws. So my concern is that your developer or your contractor suggested two options, being dredging and being a buoy and going out to tender. But I recall years ago the Trent Severn Waterways putting sort of a memorandum on any boathouse builds on Gloucester Pool, because we're part of the Trent Severn. And at that time, the solution was for people to use a marine railway and have the boathouse on land. So you could still have a finger dock, so you could enjoy your boat and do that, but have a marine railway so it's on land. The property that you purchased, you would have known at the time of purchase that it was very shallow and that you didn't have deep waterfront, and putting a dock on would be challenging. So that was likely part of the purchase price as well, not being, deep waterfront. Again, I'm not trying to be difficult in the sense of trying to prevent you from enjoying your property. However, one person enjoying their property shouldn't come at everyone else's expense. So I know there's another couple of other neighbors who are on this chat as well. We would love to see you enjoy your property and have access to it and use a boat and have all that you want. However, doing that by destroying the view of other people and having it come out so much, I think is what I struggle with. So that's what I would like the committee to consider. It is a major variance. Well, it's a minor variance, but for us, having been there for 46 years and enjoyed this view and enjoying that, it seems like a bit of a major variance. So I would just like you to consider that while discussing it, and I'll leave it for anyone else to jump in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. We recognize your concern. I'm looking on the website. I do not see any other hands up, but I see, there we are.
Hi.
Carolyn Godfrey, please go ahead. And would you please give us your name and address, please?
Yep, absolutely. My name is Caroline Godfrey, excuse me, and I am from 838 Kings Farm Road. Also, hello to you, Eric. I just wanted to express a couple of comments and I guess concerns about the proposed structure. Like Jeff, I guess I have comments and concerns about exactly where that structure is going to be located. It's a little bit difficult to tell based on the drawings and the documents that we received. So it's difficult to tell exactly where it's going to come out from the property and exactly where it's going to be located. Just a couple of comments about the proposal that was put forward and the arguments in terms of why it is a minor variance. I guess when it talks, the gentleman who was speaking before was talking about the extension and how the extension is not into a narrow waterway, which is true. It doesn't go up into the bay. But I think it's important to note that that bay is used by residents quite extensively, because it is actually an area where people can canoe and kayak, they can paddleboard and go fishing, and it is out of the main waterway. So the structure may very well impede the use of the bay in that way. And so that is a concern for me. And then again, I guess that, in terms of whether or not it is in keeping with the interest of the community and the public, I guess not necessarily the interest of all of the community and public, given, some of the objections by some of the neighbors. And I think that's it. We do have some concerns about how this is going to affect that bay and how it is going to affect the surrounding neighbors. It is not minor, in my opinion.
Very well. Thank you very much, Ms. Godfrey.
Sorry, if I could also just ask, I don't know if it's possible also for us to be able to see exactly where it is coming out from the shore. Like it really, when you look at drawings on a map and when you're standing on a lake and looking at something, it's almost two totally different things. And so it feels to me like it may look deceptively minor on a piece of paper in a drawing like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the timing of that wouldn't allow us to pause for a site visit, but you know, I believe you received a notification on this application quite some time ago, and you know, you're very close proximity to where this development will take place. Unfortunately, we're not able to provide you with anything more than the documentation that was in the presentation from the planner.
But we didn't receive that information. Like the documentation in the presentation wasn't included in the notice.
But you did get a notice
Yes.
sometime, yeah. And
Excuse me, Tom, if I may, Eric, because we are familiar with that bay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens, I need to find out if there's anyone else that wishes to
Apologies.
comment on this application. I don't see anyone else on the screen. So, Mr. Stevens, I see your hand. You had further comment?
Thank you. Apologies for that. Eric, if I may just ask, because, you know, we are familiar with the bay and we know where your current dock is, where would the proposed ramp be and the boathouse be from that on your property? Just so we can try to better understand the positioning.
So the proposed dock, right?
No, his name is Steve.
So the proposed dock will be to the left of the property. That small dock that was in front was a temporary dock in the summertime. That will no longer be there if this permanent structure goes in. So it will be further to the left, looking out at the lake of the property.
Right. So I think you guys have like a bit of a boat ramp or something down there from your shore. Is that where it would be, if I recall?
We do not.
No, I just thought, okay, I could be wrong.
There's nothing there. So maybe you're looking at a different property then.
No, I know your property. I've been there 46 years. I've been on the water, so I know it very well. Just going off recollection, in the summer, it looked like there was a pathway or something where stuff could be put in, but I could be wrong from that. So it's to the left. If you're looking from our property to yours, it's to the left of where that current dock is, in further into that bay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions or members of the public that wish to address the committee at this point, I'll close the public session of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with Member Predko. Mr. Predko, you're on mute. You're still on
I
mute.
guess, you know, I'm not, I should be better now. I guess we're having one of those days where we're all having a mute. So this picture that we're looking at, I guess it's page, it's 57 of 220 in David's agenda package. I'm just trying to match that up with the Google perspective of like the Google map of the property. And it looks, and correct me if I'm wrong, the property owner should be able to confirm this, but you're inside a little bay. So the fact that your dock and extension and boat port are extending into the bay, you are already recessed. Is that not correct?
Oh, sure. Yes, it is recessed with inside the bay.
Okay, I mean, I can understand the residents' concerns about this coming into the bay, but from what I can see from your property's angle on Google Maps, it looks like it won't come out farther than some of the other land masses that are in the shoreline that are already in existence. Is that also correct?
So what is not shown on the bottom of that drawing is the extension of the point. So the point on the adjacent property, so I guess it would be to the south of us, that point sticks out substantially further than what the dock shows. So it's recessed well with inside that bay. So okay. We're trying to strike a balance of how far we can go out to have a usable dock without impacting our neighbors' views.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to confirm.
Thank you, Member Predko. Member Rivet, please.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, may I know the neighbors who are here, where their properties are in relation to this property?
Hi, Jeff Stevens here. Cottage is 842 Kings Farm Road. If you're looking at this diagram, we are the second one in on the point across from Island 280. So the first pie-shaped lot would be Caroline and Ian Godfrey. The next one over would be ourselves, Stevens. And then the next three are actually the Dunsmores. And Scott and Dara Dunsmore couldn't be here today because they're traveling, but they share our concerns, and they share a similar desire to find a solution that works where everyone can enjoy their property, but not at, at the sake of what has been a beautiful natural habitat that everyone could enjoy. So trying to find a balance there. And again, Eric, we're not trying to, prevent you from enjoying your properties, just trying to find a balance where people can still enjoy that bay and their views.
Thank you. My second question is, explain to me again, what is the opportunity for for dredging to build a dock within the permitted length?
And who was that question directed to?
I guess to the planner.
The planning department is responsible for reviewing the information that the applicant has put in front of you in terms of.
Thank you. My question is, I guess, to the applicant, is dredging an option?
Dredging is potentially an option. It'd probably be the most ecologically destructive, because I'd have to be doing it on a continual basis. It would have to be, because of the substrate is somewhat silty, it would continue to backfill itself over time. Okay,
thank you. Did you explore marine railway and a price for that?
We didn't, only for the fact that we would have to then put a structure on the property, which would be the destruction of additional vegetation, which is what we're trying to avoid.
There's a boat port going in and a new dock?
But that's out in the lake.
Right. So from the lake, could you build a marine rail, like a marine facility from the lake, so that you could bring your boat in from the shallow water and bring it up on land?
Again, we could, but it would mean the destruction of several trees.
You couldn't put it where the proposed boat is, where the proposed boat dock is now? It couldn't be built with that structure?
You mean have a dock over the water with the railway?
Yeah, alongside that dock?
So I guess the point of the dock is to also have a swimming platform as well, along with boat storage. So with this marine railway, that would not achieve what we're looking for. So a marine railway is absolutely achievable from a boat standpoint.
Right.
But again, having a dock that you could swim off of, that wouldn't be achievable through a marine railway application, only from the fact that you would be bringing it into extremely shallow water. That's the premise of our application, to extend the dock out an additional literally 20 feet into usable water depth.
If I may, Mr. Chair. We take a look at marine railways, I think more in the sense where we have shorelines that cannot survive high waves. Docks themselves get destroyed by ice. In this particular case, if you heard a little bit, the marine railway into a substrate just can continue to sink. It's got less than 2 feet of water that goes out 12, quite a distance into the lake. And one other thing is the Planning Act, and this is everywhere in Ontario, does not protect a view. We don't, when you go to build on the vacant lot next to your house, and you lose that beautiful view you had out over the pasture, the meadow, or over the valley, we do not protect views. What we are taking a look here is the impact, physical to the environment and to their actual true enjoyment of their property. Did we take anything truly away from that? But otherwise, we'd never be able to build anything because we're taking away somebody's view.
Thank you. My question is not about the view. My question is about a way to avoid 20 extra feet of dock protruding onto that area. And if that could be accomplished by, you're building a boat port, so you couldn't build the boat port, I don't know, maybe I'm not using the right language, but with a device so that you could accept a cradle, float your boat in with enough draft that you could get it in, put it on a conveyance and pull it into your dock port.
Again, without dredging, there's simply not enough water depth to do that. And if you were to bring it further up out of the water, then you'd have to extend the roof even higher. Which is, that would be the worst thing you could possibly do. I personally believe affecting neighbors' views.
Right. I am thinking about the impact on the neighbors and their comments about open and obvious. When you bought it, you knew what the shoreline was there. So it's not like it was you weren't surprised that you had a shallow shoreline.
I was surprised at how shallow it was that far out. At that point in time, when I looked at the property, it was wintertime. I didn't have a canoe. I didn't drive ice.
Unfortunate.
And it's unfortunate, but
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Rivet. Member Schmidt.
I'm looking at some other aerial mapping that's provided through GeoWarehouse. There's a relatively significant bay in front of that property, and I'd be glad to share this with you. And looking, I don't, even with the extension that we're referring to, I don't see an impact visually from neighboring properties the way it's the way it's set back in. I've particularly pulled the vision of the Stevens property here, and I think they would have to go out in a boat to have a direct view of this slip that is going to affect his view. So I understand, we have to navigate our waters. As we say, we buy cottages to enjoy the water, and I'm comfortable with what I see. And if anybody would like to look at this, they're more than welcome to see my data here.
yes, I fail to see how it would impact Mr. Stevens' view either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Schmidt. Member Jarvis, please.
Thank you. I do have, I had some initial concerns with this, and I think dredging is a poor option because I think we've been over that ground before. Dredging does a lot of more ecological damage than this proposal would provide to us. So I've been seeing that as probably the best of the options. This is a floating structure, correct?
No, it will be a
Fixed.
pile. Yes, exactly.
Okay. And water levels in Gloucester are regulated, correct?
Correct. They vary within a foot. They drop about a foot at a time, and then raise up.
And I thought there was a very interesting comment from our planner about the height of boat ports being measured from the high water mark. And we might want to have another review of that when it comes to the waters of the Georgian Bay, since they're predicted to go down significantly. So we could have some pretty high boathouses in the near future. Question is, and to our applicant, we're looking for it's a 0.6 meter height overage on what's on in our bylaws. What's the need for the additional 0.6 meters in height?
In all fairness, this was a plan that was taken from an existing dock on the far side of Gloucester Pool. So I actually, in all fairness, I wasn't aware that you were in violation of the bylaw on that particular aspect.
Oh, okay. And then to our planner, the 0.6, the high water mark, is the high water mark noted in any of the paperwork we've been given? I don't think it is here because it's a water line, correct? It's basically the current water line in Gloucester Pool. Like the high water mark, there's very low variation of water levels in Gloucester.
Right.
So I can imagine that the high water mark, and you can correct me, or maybe we should check, the high water mark and the current water mark are pretty close.
Correct.
Sorry, that was, I apologize. I am still learning about all these regulated, unregulated, and it was not where the Gloucester, considering its size, had a regulated dam system on it, like some of the inland lakes,
Yeah.
considering how far back up it comes.
Yeah.
So, and that it's going to stay within a foot or so of that, but either way, it doesn't matter. As you pointed out, it's measured from the high water mark.
Yeah.
In this particular case.
So, okay, I mean, over and above the fact that I would have liked to have seen that this was in compliance from a height standpoint, and it's a 15% deviation, I don't think that's a big deal, but that's about my only thing that I would think would be a nice concession. I would really recommend that our applicant talk to his neighbors, but I don't see any other option on this from my perspective. He must have some pretty good sized boats to need that much dockage lengthwise over and above, the extension out into that part of the water.
We chose the maximum allowable size. We thought we would start with that.
Well, you can invite some very high profile guests with big boats, I guess.
Sounds like fun.
Anyway, thank you for answering the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the opportunity of visiting the site where they're proposing to put the dock and the ramp. There's going to be no tree destruction. I think the applicant has worked hard to mitigate the view between the cottage and the dock, and I don't have an issue with it. I do have a question though to planning, and maybe it only applies to Georgian Bay, but I thought there was an opportunity to have a ramp that allowed you 4, 5, 6 feet of water before your dock actually counts as a dock. Now, Stephen, maybe I know Mr. Cooper had a big issue with this, and I think so the ramp is really, it's just a pathway to get to the dock, right? And I'm not sure that it should necessarily be included in the total length.
Our diagrams measure the ramp from the water's edge out. So if a ramp kind of comes up onto the rockway or whatever it is in order to provide a safe, I think that is separate and distinct from the concept of the ramp being part of a dock system. So ramps start, I believe, at the water's edge and measured from there. And then if you need decking, if you want to call it that, or another ramp to get safely down the rocks, those are looked at separately. But I should always be careful. I'm still learning very much the intricacies of your bylaws, and some members may already know better than I do.
Yeah, so I guess my point is that I don't think the dock itself is oversized or the boat port. It's just trying to get to it, and that's not an issue that
that's correct, right?
The applicant has created. It's Mother Nature has created this, and I have the impression that the ramp should not be included as part of the projection necessarily.
Right. In this particular case, it is. And if you take a look at the variance is the ramp length it takes you out. The docks proposed their standard size,
right?
And what's for and the boat port, other than a little change in height, it's the ramp.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Matthews. If there are no further questions,
Could I have a question? I do have a question.
Member Rivet, you have a
Yes,
question?
I have a question.
Yes, please proceed.
Could you just tell me again, what is the depth of the water at the 50-foot mark as opposed to the 70-foot mark that's being proposed?
I believe at the 50-foot mark, we were less than a meter depth. And at the 70-foot mark, which is what we're asking for, would be, I think it was just over 4 feet. So it's not exactly, we're not gaining a lot, we're gaining just enough to make it usable. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the difference between 50 and 70?
So at 50, we were less than 1 meter.
Wow.
And at 70, we're just over that. I think we're about 4 feet.
How much less than 1 meter? Like
2.5 feet, roughly, is what we measured. So if a meter is 3.3 feet, We measured less than a meter. It was roughly 2.5 feet.
What's the draw on your boat?
It is 2.5 feet, 2.5, 3 feet, depending on loading. So
I would consider this if the dock were perhaps 10 feet shorter. I just don't see the need. I'm listening to the neighbors. I appreciate that the encroachment's coming out. I appreciate that it's shallow water. I also appreciate that it's the shoreline is something, will definitely interrupt a navigation around the shoreline.
but it's not in a navigation route. It's within inside a bay.
I realize that,
Okay.
but it's still people that, if you're still following the shoreline, whether or not, it's still.
And
following
the
the
argument
shoreline.
is there's docks and boathouses all over the shoreline.
Mhm.
So I fail to understand how my dock would be any different than anybody else's.
Well, it's 20 feet longer than the rest of them.
Fair enough, with inside a bay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Member Jarvis, you have a question?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think we got to be careful here, because if we were to somehow change your configuration and bring everything back into shore, which I'm not envisioning at the moment, but I'm just making a hypothetical statement. Boat agitation of the lake bed from boat motors becomes another issue entirely in shallower water. So I think we're mitigating that with your proposal. I would only like to recommend that you and your neighbors have a good heart-to-heart discussion about this before fully goes ahead. But that was my only comment.
And sorry if I may comment on that. We had in-depth conversations on that when we applied to the Trent Severn Waterway, as I had to have full consent, written consent from both neighbors before proceeding. So full plans were disclosed, discussed, and approved. So yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If there's no further questions, I would just like to pass one final comment in that I did have the opportunity to visit the site. And there's a couple of characteristics there that you need to be aware of. And first of all, the vegetation that we're talking about at shoreline is not brush. These are substantial pine trees, that are sitting there hardly covered with any dirt. So, it would not be advisable to mess with those. The other point of it is that, there's a flat ledge of rock that's basically 2 feet deep that you can't hardly bring more than a canoe over. So, and the boat capacity for the boat dock is in the 20 to 25 foot range. So I guess it's whatever somebody's perception is of what a big boat is. In Georgian Bay, that's not a big boat. And in Gloucester Pool is not much of a boat either if you go past a lock. So, I just wanted to dispel any vision that this is some gargantuan structure. It's not. So with that, and thank you very much for hanging in there and answering all these questions, Mr. Woerner. With that, I will read the resolution. It is moved by member Rivet, seconded by member Predko. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment hereby approves minor variance application A22-20 for the construction of a ramp, dock, and boat port, subject to the following conditions. A, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision. And B, that a decision applies only to the ramp, dock, and boat port as indicated on Schedule A and Schedule B attached to and forming part of this decision. Any other variances that may appear on the schedules that are not listed in the written description are not authorized. That this decision expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the development. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Okay, again, just ask for a show of hands. And based on the show of hands, the application is approved and the motion is passed. Thank you very much. Our next application is A22-18 for 161 West Shore Road. To the planner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, applications by Clapp. The applicants proposed to construct a new two-story dwelling plus basement, attached deck, a new detached garage, and relocate the septic disposal bed. To facilitate that new constructions, the applicants would demolish existing buildings and structures, being a one-story wood-sided dwelling, a wood-sided bunkie, a vinyl-clad sided shed, a wood-sided shed, and an existing wood deck. Pretty much everything that's there now is going to go. So I'm just, my internet connection is unstable apparently. So pretty much everything that's there at the moment is going to go, and then a redevelopment. And let's just take a look at the pictures. And I will. So general location of the property. You can see the upland wetlands, which we'll talk about in the, and then the, again, on a little embayment into on the lake. There are photos. The surveys we get are extremely busy, especially when you layer over top new buildings over top of existing buildings, over top of contours, over top of benchmarks, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what we get from them, and we try to sort it out. So this is everything, existing and proposed, all in one. Okay. This one here is the 75-meter setback to the PSW from the property line, not from the buildings themselves or from the septic system, but from the property line. Some of the little bit cleaned up is the proposed development and the contours. And this one, if you had zoomed in, you'd be able to see the setbacks on it, but there is another drawing here that gives you a little clearer view of what the proposed is for the new buildings themselves. So the detached garage, the two-story single-family dwelling, wood deck, and the existing dock is not part of the application. Okay, but it's there for reference purposes. Any approximate location of the septic system. We have a facade on the lakeside. This is important because you can see two full stories and a basement, which is covered 50%. The Schedule B is all those buildings on that initial survey to be removed or to be demolished in this particular case. Site photos are existing site. You can see the nice large pine on the property. It does go uphill, again, typical of most of our properties, existing docks, and then everything you pretty much see here in terms of buildings is to be gone, to be demolished. Vegetation, and again, how the property rises up. And some of the pictures again of the existing buildings that are to be removed. The layout, and you all know this from site visits and talking about properties, is extremely important, especially when we have properties that are not necessarily flat. It includes a lot of bedrock, a lot of mature trees. So just to, my philosophy, is it better to develop in an existing disturbed location, or is it better to push people back further from the lake, forcing them to blast and to destroy mature trees? So that figures a big part into how I take a look at a lot of your applications. There is certainly relationships to the lake that are too close, but where the other environmental things come into play, getting closer to PSWs, destroying large mature trees, blasting platforms in order to get building sites that work, we need to, I think we need to take a look at the balance between, how we deal with those kind of issues. And they are a major part of how I review applications. So the purpose of the minor variance, we're going to vary the request is to vary the height for the detached garage, and increase the building height on it of 5.4 meters versus 4.5. Vary the requirement of section 420 permitted yard encroachments, permit an increased yard encroachment of 4.6 meters for detached deck, whereas it's only allowed for 4 in the bylaw. Vary section 6.3 to permit a reduced front yard from the shoreline of 17.6 for the single detached versus a requirement for 20 meters. Vary the requirement of 6.3 for an increased height of 10.1 versus 8 in the bylaw. And permitted increased lot coverage of 13% for the detached dwelling, the deck and the detached garage, whereas the bylaw permits a maximum lot coverage of 10 for lots on the Trent Severn in the shoreline residential SR1 zone. Again, we're on an indentation of the Gloucester pool area. The lot is 3565 square meters measured above regulated water. There's the regulated water that I should have mentioned in the other application. Has a lot frontage of 58. There is existing one-story dwelling, all those numbers in there in terms of his existing square footage of 219 square meters. And we don't slope steeply towards the water in this particular case. Budding properties are SR1, similar zoning, and Crown lands to the north, to the west and southwest. District official plan, waterfront, natural heritage, archaeological potential, Trent Severn waterway. The township official plan, waterfront again, appendix 4, the 120 meters to the PSW, adjacent to fish habitat type 2, narrow water bodies, the Trent Severn. The Gloucester pool is a moderate sensitive water body, which I should have covered off in the other one also too. Shoreline residential 1. PPS issues. The rural lands, again, across the entire township area, does allow for this type of development within the area on the lake. The natural heritage policy, site alteration, and so on and so forth. We need to have that be consistent with the provincial policy statement on these particular issues. Okay, the 4 tests. Okay, first of all, the district official plan. I went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different policies that apply within the district official plan. The area is designated waterfront, which fits. The natural environment issues with the PSW. We are located within the 120 meters, as I showed you on the one map. But again, the particular development in this particular case is pretty much downhill from there, and we don't see it having any negative impact overall on that PSW, considering the location of both the proposed septic, the garage, and so on and so forth, and the replacements. They did submit, however, an environmental impact study, and has been peer reviewed by Hutchinson. And Hutchinson has just stated that reasonable recommendations to avoid and mitigate negative impacts were proposed, and overall that the EIS was acceptable. Lake Health System Health, again, for the district's Lake Health System program. The EIS did take a look at health issues and all the rest of it. And there wasn't any particular issues with the development in this particular location. Overall, 2673 permits redevelopment on existing lots where an improvement over the existing situation is achieved. We're removing all these various buildings. That will be a net improvement to the number, location, and lot coverage of buildings within the 20-meter area. We're removing a lot of all of those. So overall, within the 20 meters, just the structures, the new structure is actually a net improvement of how many buildings and structures we have within the 20-meter area. And the new location of the building will a lot further reduce any setbacks to the lake in this particular case. The new septic system will be installed at least 30 meters from the high water mark, and the new septic system is always a great improvement on phosphorus management and nitrogen management. And a planting area for the front yard will be required to help improve phosphorus management if anything actually does happen to move that way direction towards the lake. Moderate to high archaeological potential, we see the number of buildings and structures on the property and the already development to be removed. And overall, I don't think an archaeological assessment is required. I'm of the opinion the minor variance does maintain the general intent and purpose of the district official plan. Township official plan has also quite a few policies that need to be taken a look at. Again, designated waterfront. The same or similar framework for the environmental issues are within that, and I've already covered them off by the scope of environmental impact study has been looked at. The D2242 states the natural shoreline is critical to protecting water quality, and a minimum target of 75% of linear shoreline is to be maintained. Preparing and registering a tree retention and planting plan is a condition of approval. We are trying to get a little bit more in this particular case. Although if you took a look at the property where you stick a tree on bedrock is getting to be pretty tough. So our net improvements are not exactly always the greatest, I guess. Trans Severn Waterway, the consultant's proponent did note that Parks Canada had been contacted also in this particular case. One of these policies, which are quite important in your official plan, is 53313. That states that buildings or structures more than 2 stories plus a roof in height shall not be permitted. It seems we haven't looked at this policy in quite a while. And it's actually one line at the bottom of a page, kind of stuck in a funny wayward section of the OP. But it's been having an impact on us reviewing some of these height issues that are coming up in the OP. Really, what I think what the OP is trying to do is trying to deal with some of these visual impacts that we're getting from extremely tall 3 stories, whatever it is, plus a roof and all the rest of it that are coming about. And especially when you start to get to some of our more modern designs, a lot of glass, a lot of reflection, so on and so forth, that's coming about from some designs, not all. The bylaw does note, the zoning bylaw does note that when we take a look at the story, what is a story? A basement is a story, okay, within the definition. And especially when that, even if that call it, when you call it a basement and call it a walkout, when you look from the lake and it's got that 3 stories, well, that's just the basement. No, it's a story. And the official plan says 2 stories, okay, plus a roof. So how do we deal with this? Well, they have a basement. It's a story. Well, since there's no overall definitions in our official plan, we need to take a look at the zoning bylaw. And the bylaw says that if your basement is buried 50%, then it's not a story. Okay, you're reducing in this particular case, right? You're reducing that lakeward exposure, right? Okay, so you buried it in this particular case, which they're proposing, and you're only getting a thinner line of glass as opposed to a full walkout basement. Okay, is that 50%? There's other ways of dealing with the 50%. This way is burying the whole basement wall 50%. The other option is to bury it halfway across fully and only have, say, a walkout door or a patio door or a little bit for 50%. It's reducing the overall exposure, again, that lake exposure, facade exposure, by doing the 50%. And that's where the leeway is kind of given within that. And that's where they're getting here the ability to go ahead with 2 full stories of roof and that exposure of the building on the basement. Overall, I do believe that the proposal they put forward does maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan. So they've asked for quite a few variances. You know, there's the proposed in the required and the proposed in the table. So required 20 meters, 17.6 meters. Lot coverage 12.9, front yard again 17.6, building height 10.1 to the 8, decks 4.6 versus 4, and height for the garage 5.4 versus the 4.5. Okay, and all those calculations are available on that in your package on the submission from the applicant. So right now, all 100% of the existing 1-story wood building is located within 20 meters. Okay, 100%. Right? Most of the new dwelling, 90% of the new dwelling will be outside of the minimum 20. A net improvement on that overall. Okay, the deck projection into the front yard on top of that is minimal in terms of the request. You know, 60 centimeter, you know, 0.6 of a meter, right? You can't visually even see that. Overall, as I noted, to be a net improvement in the number of structures in the front yard overall with just this one. Okay. The overall massing, the proposed 10.1 meter height together with 76 feet of ground floor plus, which is plus 68 feet of second floor glass building facade will be highly visible for years. Okay, it is a lot. Okay, compared to that little tiny cottage that goes back years, the new one is going to be a dominant feature, just like some of our newer cottages on the landscape. Okay, but if we can get some trees in the front, okay, it's going to take what 30 30 some years for trees to grow up, but if we get some trees in front, it will begin to deal with that over the long term. And it's no promise, but there is a commitment from the applicants to do some what they can for planting in the front yard in order to deal with that front lake view, if you call it, from it. It's not going to totally take away from all of it, and they're still going to have a view of the lake from it. The overall intent of the maximum lot coverage in this particular zone is to prevent situations where buildings and other structures dominate the land. Okay, by limiting lot coverage, we can maintain a sense of space, isolation from others, and in Georgian Bay, a feeling of being in nature. Maximum lot coverage also ensures that there is sufficient naturalized amenity area and infiltration areas for rainfall to assist with dilution of on-site septic waste. The increase in lot coverage from 10 to 13 will not just detract from any of those or have a negative impact on any of those or on the intent of a maximum lot coverage provision. The 5 meter maximum height for the detached garage, okay, we're going to incorporate. So here's another funky thing with the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw right now provides a 5 meter maximum height for a detached garage when it incorporates a sleeping area in the upper half floor. Okay, 5 meters. The proponents are not proposing a sleeping area to gain height, but consideration can be given that the maximum height in other situations would be 5 meters, not 4.5. What I'm saying is that if they were to build a sleeping area, they'd be able to get their height. But since they just want it as a garage with a little bit of extra height, they can't get their height without going through a variance. So in that particular case, with a funky kind of interpretation of the bylaw, it's like, okay, you know, we're good with it, if you know, I'm good with it, sorry, if you know what I mean. So the garage would be set back 10 meters from the property line, plus it is shielded from the road on that particular side by a copse of trees. In relationship to views from the lake, the garage will be well shielded by existing mature trees, so you won't be able to tell the height either in terms of the small variance. Overall, I think it maintains the intent and general purpose of the zoning bylaw. The appropriate and desirable development. Over time, it can be expected that property owners will grow and replace, add to, or build new structures on their property, which allows them to maximize the benefit, value, and use of their property. It is happening every day. Okay? No negative character or environmental impacts are anticipated due to the proposal. Given the landscape and topographical constraints in the property, requiring the proponents to comply with the bylaw will result in a higher level of environmental disruption than the continuation and enlargement of the use in a proposed location. I am of the opinion that the minor variance is appropriate and desirable development for the subject lands. Be minor in nature. Again, this test is not a numerical determination. And minor can be taken a look at whether proposed development will have minor impact on the environment, the enjoyment and the use of neighboring properties, or impacts on the functioning of government or other utility or essential services. So when we take about, in particular, the enjoyment and the use of neighboring properties, so we just looked at a minor variance. Okay, we, as I mentioned before, we don't protect views, but whether or not they can still enjoy their property to the full effect, being able to use it by swimming, by boating, by not having any disturbance to them being when they have family over, when they are sitting on their deck. Yeah, there's none of those, that particular impacts in this particular case. There's also no impact on any government or any utilities or anything else in that particular matter. And again, I don't see any particular problems with the character of the neighborhood. In this particular case, we are seeing these large buildings all over the place. In this particular case, the applicants actually reduced the height of their building. They had proposed a full walkout basement originally, which would have been 3 full stories. But in discussions with the planning department, they did move it back to 2 with a half-buried basement. Not what they wanted, but it did deal with some of that lake facade issues that we were talking about. Based on the review of the policies, I recommend approval of the application. The proposed complies with the PPS and meets the 4 tests of a minor variance. Thank you.
One letter of support was received from Peter Benton.
Thank you. I see we have a gentleman present. Are you the applicant for this? For the next, all right, thank you. So, okay, very good. All right, very well. Is the applicant present and would they wish to offer comment to the committee?
Yes, thank you to the chair. I'm representing the applicant, Amanda Hoffman from Jones Consulting Group. And I do have a presentation that I would love to share with committee if chair would permit that.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Bear with me. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So yes, hello, members of committee, and thank you to staff for providing all that information. My name is Amanda, and we represent the owner of the lands located at 161 West Shore Road, who have submitted a minor variance application for the redevelopment of a single detached dwelling and a new detached garage. The subject lands are outlined in red, have a lot area of 0.3 hectares, and are located on Gloucester Pool. So the purpose of the minor variance application, as David described, is to request an increased building height for the detached garage, an increased yard encroachment for the attached deck, a reduced front yard setback for the new dwelling, an increased building height for the new dwelling, and a increased lot coverage for the lands. So the lands currently contain a single detached dwelling with attached decks, a sleeping cabin, 2 sheds, a woodpile structure, multiple detached decks, and a pump house. So this photo shows the view of the property from the lakeside. This is the site plan noting all the various existing buildings and structures on the lands. So all buildings and structures will be demolished except for the dock and deck outlined in green that will remain as is. The new 2-story proposed dwelling, which includes a basement and detached garage, is outlined in red. So these are the proposed elevation drawings for the dwelling. The dwelling will have a basement, which a small portion peeks through from the lakeside view. These are the proposed elevation drawings for the garage. These drawings show more the retaining walls, which are needed to accommodate the slope of the property, which staff also discussed. The lands are designated waterfront in the township's official plan and zoned shoreline residential 1 in the township zoning bylaw, which does permit single detached dwellings and accessory structures. So a number of plans and reports were required for the application and prepared otherwise. The owners did go through the pre-consultation process with staff and submitted everything in accordance with what was requested. Since the submission of the application, we have worked extensively with township staff and the environmental consultant Hutchinson Environmental to address all comments and prepare anything additional that they need for their review. So the environmental study concludes the development will not negatively impact any natural heritage features, including species at risk. A planting plan is currently being prepared to demonstrate the net improvement in the shoreline buffer compared to existing conditions. The owners have also retained an arborist to ensure the development complies with the township's tree cutting bylaw. And we prepared a planning justification report to review how the proposed development meets the 4 tests of a minor variance, which we will further explain in the next slides. So the proposal will maintain the general intent and purpose of the district and township official plan, as the detached garage will clearly be an accessory building. It will be located behind the proposed dwelling with over 30 meters from the shoreline, and the size will be less than 100 square meters. The official plan allows a lesser setback from the shoreline to be considered when the proposal is a redevelopment. This application is a redevelopment of a previously disturbed lot and will result in an increased front yard setback to the shoreline from existing conditions. The existing dwelling, as shown on the site plan, was approximately 9.3 meters from the shoreline, and the new dwelling will be over 17 meters. Further, an environmental study was prepared to ensure there will be no negative impacts to natural heritage features, as well as a list of mitigation measures that the owners will provide. A planting plan is being prepared to also renaturalize that shoreline area. So the proposal will maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the garage will be accessory to the dwelling, and the height variance will result in an increase of less than 1 meter. The increased height of the dwelling will not negatively impact the built form, as it will be a 2-story shoreline building, which is compatible with the surrounding area. Although we are requesting a reduced front yard setback for the dwelling and deck, the development will result in an overall increase to the setback than what is existing, and all other setbacks will be complied with. The development will maintain the shoreline residential use, and the environmental study concludes the development will remain adequately set back from the shoreline and no other impacts are anticipated. So the increased lot coverage will still allow the lands to contain appropriate vegetation and tree cover. So the lands have a significant slope, and the required variances for increased height are related to those site-specific features. In our opinion, the design will be consistent with the character of the area, and it is appropriate for the lands. The development will not impact any property owner's view of the waterfront, as adjacent dwellings are located to the east and west, and Crown land is located to the south. The shoreline setback will also be increased from what is existing, and there will be increased plantings. So in our opinion, the request is minor in nature, as there are no adverse land use impacts on adjacent property owners or the broader area. The buildings will be consistent with the built form in the area, will have sufficient setback from the shoreline, and a significant portion of the lot will remain undeveloped and vegetated. So the variances will not negatively impact surrounding land uses or natural heritage features. So in conclusion, the proposed application is consistent with the PPS, district official plan, and township official plan. The application will meet all other development standards in the SR1 zone, and in our opinion, it represents good planning. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. And I know there's going to be a question before you take your slide presentation down.
Yep.
Do you have a drawing or something that shows where the new development is in relation to the picture that we see on the left-hand side here, where the existing dwelling is?
I do.
There's a substantial drop off there. Are you building on top of the hill? Or are you building somewhere down?
Yes. Great question. So let me go back, as I think another photo really shows it. So see this pathway on the left picture here?
Yeah.
So I like this picture to show, as this pathway kind of represents where the new dwelling is going to begin, where the attached deck. So where it drops off here, this vegetation in the front here is not going to be impacted. These trees down here and the dock, the pathway kind of represents where it's going to start and come back. So that's why it's about 17 meters from the shoreline. You can really see that it is quite a setback.
Is that pathway, let's say, the back side of the house, or is it the side closest to the lake?
Oh, where the dwelling will start?
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty much aligned in the center of the pathway here. So I guess for argument's sake, the side closer to the lake. I don't think the surveyor pinned it in relation to the pathway. It's just a good photo reference.
Okay. Thank you for that additional information.
Of course.
Up front. So is the applicant present on the Zoom meeting, and would they wish to offer any further comment?
Hi, I'm present, but no further comments other than Amanda's.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, actually, I do have one comment. We did have 2 letters of support. Our direct neighbor did submit one as well. Miro.
You're being very hard to understand, so I don't know whether you're too close to the microphone or there's an echo or something.
Oh, apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was just going to say one point of clarification is we did have 2 letters of support. Our direct neighbor submitted one as well.
Now, were those submitted to the township?
Yes, I believe so. I can.
Okay.
They may I have it here if you want me to forward it.
Must be still in the post. We don't show them as related here. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to add comment? I see Mr. Clapp is in attendance. Is it no further? Okay, then seeing none, I will close the public session of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with member Rivet.
Thank you. My question is, I understand the topography might make the building sit a little high. Is that the situation with the garage, or is it just because it's higher than it's supposed to be?
Through the chair. So the actual height of the garage from the base to the midpoint of the roof does comply with the maximum height of a garage. It's simply because the building height measurement has to include those retaining walls, and that's why we needed the variance. So the actual height of the garage, I believe, is exactly 4.5 meters when measured from the base of the garage to the midpoint. But when you're including those retaining walls, since it's part of the structure, we exceed that maximum height.
Thank you. My second question is there any reason the building can't be pushed back to meet the 20-meter setback?
So essentially, as I said, that the building is trying to align with that existing pathway that already has a bit of low in the topography, and that's kind of why that location was chosen. So that's why the request is required. And once you keep going farther back, the property owners will need to go through, as we said, some trees will need to be cut in accordance with the bylaw, the basement. So keeping further back, you get higher and higher in slope. So it was a mix of trying to comply with the bylaw, but also being conscious of the topography.
So my question is it impossible to move the building back to meet the 20-meter setback for the dwelling? Is it possible to move it back without it going higher, or that's my question.
Yes. So to respond to that question, so yes, the further you move it back, the higher the height will end up being when looking from the lakeside. As you imagine, it will keep going up in topography. But I guess to answer your question, it's not impossible to meet the 20-meter setback, but it will require more tree cutting, more blasting, and again, it will cause the actual building to keep moving further up.
Okay, question. So more blasting? Are they blasting for this project? Does it require blasting?
It may, because of the basement, but again, that will be sorted out through the building permit process. As you can see that they are going to go down into the ground, so it may require that. I think if you were to keep pushing back, that chance significantly increases.
If the building is pushed back, can it not stay the same height, simply losing the clearance in the basement?
What I think is mentioning is that we're moving uphill. Every time we move back, we're moving up and up, which means that from the lake, it has a better and better view because you're higher and higher. I think that's my understanding of moving it back is in terms of height, is that actually it's view from the, it's not going to change the height of the building. It's still going to be the same from the basement to the top of the peak. But when you look from the lake, you're looking at a higher point. It's like now being on the top of the mountain as opposed to being 3/4 of the way down.
Thank you, David. That's correct.
Is the plan to have a fully excavated basement the same footprint as the building? Is that
correct?
Necessary? Is that necessary?
Is that?
Like
I think
if they're going to blast, if they have to blast anyway, can't they just blast it so that if they're going to blast anyway, can't you blast it so you can push it back so it's away from the front? My concern with this is the massing. We've got this 78-foot wide building, tall, 3 stories plus a roof, and we've got this ginormous garage behind it. So the further back it goes, the less intrusive it is. It can go back without coming high. They might just lose a bit of space in the basement. I mean, already this building is 3,900 square feet, which is the other question. What's the maximum building size for this zone? Like, what's the maximum footprint? Because this building's already 3,900 square feet. So could it not just go back? I mean, you can build it back, blast a little deeper, and just move it back. I mean, if they're blasting anyway, why not meet some of the setbacks? There's 5 major setbacks here for a minor variance. There's 5 major variances here.
correct. I think through the chair, in terms of the maximum building side, there's no maximum footprint. There is a maximum lot coverage for the SR1 zone. Since they are in the Trent Severn, this is 10%. And one of the variances is to increase that to 13%. However, in our planning opinion and the environmentalist opinion, there will still be a significant amount of vegetation on the property. In terms of position of the building, I'm not sure if the owner would like to speak, but this is their design that they want to move forward with. And again, it increases the setback than what's existing. They're trying to align with that already kind of low in the topography. And it will be 17 0.6 meters from the shoreline, which still provides a significant setback. And the environmentalist opinion was similar to that it would provide an adequate setback. As David mentions, there'll be increased plantings and vegetation to help mitigate that buffer.
I would prefer to see this building move back to meet the setback. Oh, sorry, no, I'm not. I would prefer to see the building go back. They're already talking, the vegetation's already going to be quite an issue for several years, we've been told. So at least I don't see if it's a brand new building, it should at least meet the setback. I don't see any reason why it can't. And I think that it should. This is going to be it's going to be a massive building. It's going to
If
be
I
big.
may, Mr. Chair, if you take a look at some of the drawings that are provided, not all of the buildings at 17.6, 90% of this building is outside the 20. 90%. And the reason why that small percentage is in the 20 is because of some of that orientation of the land and that pathway where you get that little tiny chunk. To begin to, to push those things back and push them uphill, I don't think in some respects you personally gain a lot. Yes, they could go back some. Every single one of your applications you've seen today could meet the requirements of the bylaw. Every single one of them. But what we take a look at here is the impact that are going on with that, and whether or not there's a net negative impact overall. To whom? To the environment? No. To the next door neighbors? No. To the township, to the feds, to the Trent Severn? No, for the proposal. And that's why minor variances are allowed to come forward, and you put before this committee your options to say why this should not have to meet the bylaw. And I think that what we've taken a look at here in our proposal or our review to you is that no, there's no negative overall. And the 17.6 is a minor intrusion into the 20 for that chunk of the property of the building, the 10%. Everything else, is good. And in fact, it's going to be, yes, new development. And you're
Thank
seeing
you
that
very
everywhere.
much for that, Mr. Smith. Was there anything further, Member Ruth? Okay, thank you. Member Jarvis, please.
Yeah, points of clarification. The building height is measured from grade, correct?
The building height on a garage
No,
is
cottage,
right. On a garage or on the house?
house.
The house. So the house is measured at the front. The average grade at the front and the average grade at the front. This particular house will be flat as opposed to varying.
Yep.
So the height we have is from there.
So the height we're using is the height from grade, not from the height of the fill. Grade is where the cottage is going to stand, like the slab is on grade, correct?
Right. Front slab is on grade. So
And then and then it looks like there's backfill in the front to reduce the appearance of height in the front.
Well, no, it is the appearance in the front is the actual grade. The half windows, that's the grade right there, flat across the front of the building facade.
But there is accommodation. I mean, there's where there can be, there's a full basement height wise.
Yeah, but that's buried. So the basement is half buried.
Buried by blasting?
No, buried by placing it into the garage, to the ground and backfilling.
So we are backfilling.
So we're backfilling or whatever it is to the half of the wall height.
But since we're backfilling, again, is the height of the cottage measured from the current grade or what will be the revised grade after the filling?
So Schedule A1 provides the drawing for the finished grade for the height measured to the mid peak of the roof line.
Right.
So we would expect them to, when they're finished their grading, to come to that number in order to meet the total height.
Okay, my understanding in our bylaws is that the height of a building is measured from existing grade, not from a revised grade.
No, it's always from a finished grade.
Okay,
Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to know where to start.
well, on the ground. I mean, to me, it's build it from the ground up. And to me, this looks like a 3-story building, no matter how you look at it. It's a duck. Walks like one and it quacks like one, so it's a 3-story building. And I'm not sure that any grade revision is going to make it look any better. It's a big building looking from the water. Having said that, and Amanda, if you could do me a favor, we can go back to the picture from the water of all those buildings. And can you tell me which, I'm pretty sure I know, but which buildings in that picture are being removed? And also which vegetation, because I can see a big pine tree. It looks like it's going to be impacted.
Apologies, 1 second.
If I may, I do have a picture of
Yes.
just the buildings.
Oh,
to
yeah,
the
yeah,
road.
actually, you have a better one, I think. Yeah.
That
yeah.
work? All right. Just 1 minute, please.
So if we go to the photograph from the lake, David?
I have different photos than her.
Yeah, that one there. Can we enlarge that one? So we can get a better look at it? Okay, okay, my understanding is that basically all the buildings that we're looking at there are being removed, and that deck is to the right is also being removed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and the new building is going in between the cabin and the cottage.
Correct. More in line because the bunkie, the sleeping cabin, is actually topographically higher than the cottage slightly. So it's more up in line with the cabin, but will be in the middle. Correct.
Just leave your hand there. There's a pine tree, good sized pine tree just to the right of it as I look at the picture. Is that impacted?
Yes. I believe the arborist report noted that tree will be impacted. However, how the tree cutting bylaw is, it's within 15 meters, and that is not within that area. A review of the trees that will need to be cut, and his conclusion is that the area within 15 meters will not be removed.
Within 15 meters of what?
Of the high water mark of the shoreline, because that is by the township's definition, the natural state shoreline area.
I'm just thinking again, a visual impact after you get that tree down, you put up a 3-story building. It's pretty substantial. Again, I commend the owners and you guys for having taken all the structures away and leaving us basically with one. And its setback is better than the setbacks we currently are looking at in this picture. But this is a pretty large building, and the GFA. So my questions now are, is there a limit to GFA, David, in this area?
We did not review a GFA. It didn't, I don't believe it didn't come up in this particular location. Other parts of the township certainly, but not in this one.
Okay. And
sorry, Amanda, did you?
Sorry, yes, through the chair. So in waterfront communities, there is sometimes a limit on gross floor area. This is not inside a waterfront community, and there is no limit in that regard.
This is not a waterfront community?
No, I apologize. So in the township's official plan, and maybe David could add to this, is there's areas in the township that has special regulations. So an example is 6 Mile Lake, Cognishine. This is, pardon?
A community plan.
Yes, correct. Thank you. So this property is not within that. Any of those. Yeah, so it doesn't have a maximum GFA.
I've heard the word blasting on a couple of occasions. We have a blasting bylaw that applies here, and how does it apply?
So I apologize. So I'm not in regards to blasting.
And excuse me, if I may interject, blasting or no blasting is not a part of this application, nor is it something that the committee passes judgment on. So it would be something that the applicant would take up with the building department when they go to the next step and apply for a building permit.
Okay.
Also, I just want to speak on behalf of this whole thing too. I'm Justin Sherry, the designer.
I'm sorry, who is speaking?
Justin Sherry. I designed the home.
I'm sorry, sir. You can't just jump in. We did have an opportunity for comment during the public session, and I did not see your hand up or question. So if you don't mind, I'd like to continue with responses from the members of the committee, and we'll see if we can get back to you after that.
Okay, my apologies.
Thank you. So that's it, Member Jarvis?
Just my concerns are view from the canoe on this one.
No, I appreciate that.
I appreciate the fact that a lot of the clutter has been taken out. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Predko, please.
Thank you, Chair. As I look at this application, one of the things, and I'm glad we have this picture from the lake in front of us right now, because when I'm reading it, we're removing these current buildings, and we're going to have a lot of open space, and then the new development is going to not necessarily be in the same locations as these original buildings. So we're going to be excavating and doing work, leaving these open spaces which need to be naturalized. And that would include both the cottage and the garage, and the septic bed is going to be much larger as well. So I would like to know a little bit about the planting and naturalization efforts that are anticipated, especially considering that there's going to be blasting. I mean, that's that whole the impact to the overall site is something that's on my mind. And are there any details that you can share about a renaturalization plan for this site?
Yes, through the chair. So you're correct that the buildings will be demolished, and that will leave some open areas, which is why the plan is to renaturalize. And that's why through Hutchinson Environmental's review and the township's review, there will be a planting plan. If the township would like, I do have a preliminary drawing of what's going to be submitted to Hutchinson, and it does basically show all the open areas will be renaturalized, and it also has about 6 or 7 different species that they're recommending to be planted in those areas. So I can, with the word that this has not been submitted yet to the township's environmental review, but it is the plan that will be for comment. So if the committee would like to see those details, we can, but this will be reviewed by the environmental consultants and approved by them before anything can move forward.
Yes, I think that would be beneficial if we could share that screen. I think have a look at it.
I can do that. Okay. Share. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the plan from Azimuth Environmental. So as you can see, this whole area here is proposed to be planted. All the vacant areas, so this was the original bunkie. This planting area in purple here was the original dwelling, and the planting area 4 is the new septic. So that will be more of a grass and brush in that area, but all these areas here, apologies to, this is the exact plan, but what's in this column here is the species that the ecologist is recommending in these areas and the number that they're recommending. So for example, there's a white pine. They're recommending as much as 5 in the new planting area. Their stripped maple is another tree that they're recommending, up to 35 in planting area 1. So those are just some examples of what the ecologist is recommending. And again, this will be submitted to Hutchinson Environmental, and nothing will be able to move forward until this is approved by the township.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. And while you have that drawing in front of us there, there's a plan view there of the proposed garage and a plan view of this 2-story building.
Yes.
Is there any change in elevation from, let's say, the entrance to the garage and the entrance to the dwelling?
Through the chair, I believe the answer to your question is yes. So the garage will be higher than the entrance to the dwelling. So there will be some steps, some landscape steps that kind of follow this area down to access the dwelling over here.
And just where your cursor is right now, when you is there an entrance from that side of the dwelling?
I apologize. Yes.
And
yes, there is.
Does it enter at the main level or an upper level?
The main level. He was speaking earlier, but Justin Sherry is the designer and maybe easier to answer these more specific design questions. But from my understanding, yes, the main level.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. And back to Mr. Predko, were there any other questions or comments you may have?
Yeah, just a few, just before you leave that screen, Amanda.
sorry.
It's actually a good view on where in Gloucester Pool this property is. Can you please describe, or could the owner describe the adjacent lot and the lot across the little bay there? What are you overlooking?
Apologies.
Oh yeah, I guess yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, we're in a bay, so we're overlooking out across the lake.
Okay, so what is across the lake though? Is that open land, or are there cottages on those lots over there?
So right across from us is Crown Land, and then beside us is our 2 cottages.
Okay. I mean, the only other comment or observation I want to make is I think when David Smith was sharing the photo of the view from the lake, we have to keep in mind that the new cottage being proposed is from the bunkie to the existing cottage, and that's how much frontage it's going to take up with the 2.5 stories. So it does look like it will be significant, and I was curious as to what it will be looking out on, whether there were other neighbors that would be overlooking it, or if it was an open waterway where people would be traveling. But the overall lot coverage looks like it's at that 10%, 13% mark. So my observation would be that this application is large, which I think other people have also commented on. I think that's all I have to say right now.
And thank you, Member Predko. Member Schmidt, please.
I echo some of the comments previous with regard to definitely cleaning up the shoreline, getting setbacks further back. I'm curious, many ask about the change in the visual impact of this property currently. Does anybody have an idea of the visual that they have looking out of existing cottages and the height and topography that they're looking at? So are they going to be contradictory to that, or is it going to match that bay? Because Gloucester Pool, as we know, does have some pretty significant structures on it as it is. Is there any photos out from this property?
Through the chair, there is. We did submit those to David. I do have one that I had in my presentation, and it shows the view from the current cottage looking out to the lake, and you can see across some of the 2 cottages that exist. And one of the cottages is approximately 2 stories in height. So I can share that photo again to show that if committee would like. Yes,
please go ahead.
Perfect. I believe this photo is what the committee member is asking for. So the one on the bottom left here. So as you can see, this is looking out. This is the existing dock. Above this pine is the one cottage, as well as this other cottage over here. If you can see, it's 2 stories in height. There's also, it's hard to see through the dwelling, but there's the boat port here and a cottage. But mainly this is quite open, and these ones particular is one that we kept in mind in terms of matching the character, and it is quite a distance away as well. But again, that renaturalization and will help with that buffer as well.
Yeah, I guess my comment is that if you're in a canoe, it might fit with what you're seeing in the area from said canoe once this is completed.
Yes, anything further, Member Smith?
That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Member Matthews?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is where I feel site visits are extremely valuable, even covered in snow. We were there this morning. And the topography of the land, it is quite I think Amanda said there was a significant slope I like your word terminology of significant. It's, you fall down that, you're going to keep rolling right into the bay. There's no way of stopping. It's so deep.
Yes.
I think the owners have done the best they can with the property. To Mr. Smith's comment that 90% of the building will be within the 20-meter setback. And as you look across, there was a couple of cottages, they were just on a bald rock standing up there. So I think this building with the proper tree planting will fit in quite nicely. My question is the existing lot coverage. Do we happen to know what the existing lot coverage is? I think it will be a net benefit getting rid of all the various buildings, but I'm curious if we're really increasing very much.
Apologies. The existing lot coverage is around, I believe, 7%.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're allowed 10 and you're going to 13, requesting 13.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And
sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll also make a comment that if it wasn't for the magnificent, skillful winter driving of our chair, this meeting would have been hosted in the front seat of his truck as we were right at 161 West Shore Road. So
That's why you're not supposed to go together.
it's okay.
yeah, one of us had to push, so that's why we had
Oh, goodness. Oh, I'm happy everyone is safe and well.
And is that, thank you, Member Matthews. And just on that, the question that Member Schmidt had brought forward, the view from that property is the two cottages across the bay. They're a considerable distance, and you know, I think from what we have seen proposed in general in terms of the revegetation of the area, that the appearance of the cottage will not be adverse to the view from the canoe. So, and it is an incredible slope. So now, were there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay, and I'm sorry, Ms. Rivet, do you have a comment?
Just from my perspective, the massing is significant. The height is significant. The size is significant. Everything's bigger. It would be nice to see one thing come into compliance. I still haven't heard what the hardship is to push it back. If all they're going, I mean, you can still blast, you can push it back without raising it. You might just lose a little bit of square footage in the cellar, which is not really a full size anyway. It can be done. I think it should be done. It's brand new development. Now it's time to get the net gain. It's especially since the coverage is 13%, it should be 12, and the 3% is all in the building. It's not shared anywhere else. It's significantly in your face, this building. I would like to see it go back. I would be happy. I would agree to it if it went back. I think there needs to be, I think it needs to be tightened up. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Member Rivet. And Amanda, you were mentioning earlier that the builder or the designer was present. Is there anything in addition to what's been discussed so far that you'd like to add before I read the resolution?
Justin, you're on mute if you would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just going back to the comments regarding the basement, we're actually not doing a full basement. We're stepping grade and the footings to accommodate the slope. So it's going to be a half basement and then half backfilled, just to accommodate that topography. And the reason why we can't move it back anymore is because once we start moving it back, you're essentially having your front door at the top of the roof. That's how drastic the topography is. Yeah. So we think we're in our best placement to get a front door at ground level and to not have a walkout basement by varying it that little bit. Ideally, we would have loved the house to be located in its original spot, but we thought that would be too imposing in the lakefront. So we're proposing this with a greater height increase as opposed to a reduced shoreline setback. That would be much more drastic, I think, to the waterfront.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay, thank you. And that does add more clarity to the question that arose about where the front door would be. So I understand there's a very steep slope there, and thank you for your comments, Mr. Sherry. So if there are no further questions or comments, I'll read the resolution. Moved by member Schmidt, seconded by member Matthews. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment hereby approves minor variance application A22-18 for the construction of a two-story dwelling with basement, attached deck, detached garage, and septic disposal bed, and subject to the following conditions. A, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision. B, that this decision applies only to the two-story dwelling with basement, attached deck, detached garage, and septic disposal bed as indicated in Schedule A1, Schedule A2, and Schedule B attached to and forming part of this decision. Any other variances that may appear on the schedules are not listed in the written decision and are not authorized. C, that this decision expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the development. D, that an application for demolition for these buildings and structures noted as TBD to be demolished on Schedule B of this decision be applied for concurrently with or prior to an application for a building permit for the two-story dwelling with basement, attached deck, detached garage, and septic disposal bed. And E, that in accordance with section 49, subsection 9.1 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended, the owner shall, one, at their own expense, provide a consolidated copy of the Azimuth Environmental Consulting and Scoped Environmental Impact Study for 161 West Shore Road, Township of Georgian Bay, August 2022, incorporating the peer review comments provided by Hutchison Environmental Services dated January 5, 2023. And two, at their own expense, have prepared by a qualified ecologist a tree retention and planting plan to better showcase the net improvement in the shoreline buffer compared to existing conditions and how it adheres to section 4.030 of the Township of Georgian Bay Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2014-75. The tree retention and planting plan shall A, result in a net improvement in tree coverage across the property with emphasis on the shoreline buffer, and B, consider implementation of best management practices to limit stormwater generated sedimentation, such as incorporating the French drains, and C, the location and approximate number of trees and shrubs to be planted in the area to be seed planted with ground cover, and 4, pay for peer review of said assessment studies, reports, analysis, plans as identified in condition E2, and 5, enter into one or more agreements with the township implementing the recommendations of the assessment studies, reports, and analysis as identified in condition E1 and E2. And F, that in accordance with section 45-9-2 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended, upon final approval of the township, the agreements noted in conditions E5 shall be registered at the owner's expense against the title of the land subject to this approval, and the township shall be entitled to enforce said agreements against the owner and subject to the Registry Act and the Land Titles Act against any and all subsequent owners of the land. Yeah. Should I repeat?
I missed the first paragraph.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All of those in favor? Did I hear something there? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. And where is, Okay, so we have a majority, the motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you very much.
Well, fortunately, our secretary did that for us. Yeah.
Oh, I feel.
Okay. At popular request, we are going to take a 5-minute bio break and we'll return to the meeting at 12:35. Thank you. Very well. Welcome back, everyone. And next on our agenda is minor variance application number A21-32 for 8 Island 3480 in Georgian Bay. To the planner, please.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I'll share my screen. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Good. So, hello, Chair, Committee, members of the public. My name is Jen Cadet. I'll be presenting minor variance application A2132 on behalf of my colleague, Gursimran Sani. Proposed minor variance application is for 8 Island 3480, and the owners of the property are George and Jane Wishart. And the minor variance would facilitate the construction of an addition to a legally existing dwelling by permitting an increase in gross floor area from 200 square meters to 262 square meters. The existing dwelling is 215 square meters, so the requested increase is 46 square meters. The application complies with all other provisions of the bylaw. Zoning bylaw amendment Z2208 was previously approved by council last year, and it amended the existing zoning provisions to remove the building envelopes and remove environmental protection zoning from the developable lands on the subject property. Staff are recommending approval of this application. On this map, you can see the property. It's quite large at approximately 2.24 hectares. Here you can see the existing dwelling. Here's an aerial. Again, note the existing dwelling. The addition is approximately where my mouse is located. As you can see on this survey, I've highlighted the addition in red. Here's some site photos. This is the approximate location of the proposed addition. The dwelling, can't see it, it would be right here. Here's existing boathouse and dock. No changes proposed to those structures. In terms of the policy framework, the subject property is considered rural lands in the context of the provincial policy statement. It's designated waterfront in the district and township official plans. It's within the Go Home Bay coastal waterfront community. There is unidentified fish habitat adjacent to the property. The zoning bylaw amendment that I referenced previously, part of that included a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, and that was to establish the development envelopes because the previous site-specific zoning had very small development envelopes that were very difficult to interpret. So that housekeeping amendment brought that into alignment. So there wasn't EIS done, it was just part of the previous application. And it is zoned shoreline residential island, type 3, exception 12, and that exception refers to that amendment. For committee's information, this is the zoning bylaw amendment. So this blue area here is the new development envelope. And this, you can hopefully see it on your screens, a sort of hatched area here is the addition that's the subject of this application. So in terms of the 4 tests of the minor variance, the first is the general intent and purpose of the official plan. The application conforms to the district and township official plans. The use is permitted. Environmental concerns have previously been addressed. Second test is the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. In this case, the application meets all the provisions of the bylaw with the exception of gross floor areas. You can see in this bottom row here. The intent of the restriction on gross floor area in the zoning bylaw is to maintain the view from the canoe of a naturalized shoreline and to protect the environment by limiting the intensity of use. In this case, the proposed development is on a large parcel with a lot coverage well below the permitted 5%, as you can see in this row. And all the required setbacks are complied with. It is staff's opinion that the intent of the limit on gross floor area in the zoning bylaw will be complied with. Third and fourth tests are whether the variance is minor and appropriate. In this case, the addition to be facilitated by the variance is unlikely to have a visual impact on the view from the canoe due to its location in the side yard. Previous zoning bylaw approved by council last year modified the building envelopes and established the appropriate areas for development on this property. Accordingly, staff are satisfied that the proposed variance is minor and appropriate. And as a result, staff are recommending approval of the application subject to the standard conditions notified in the staff report. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to hopefully answer them on behalf of Gersimran.
Thank you, Ms. Gannett. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence on this application?
2 letters of support were received from Ted Cape and Ann Dillon and Michael and Anita Owen. 1 letter of no objection was received from the Madawaska Club.
Thank you. I see that the applicant is present. Is there anything that you wish to add to the comments provided by the planner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. George Wishart. I'll be brief because Jennifer's report was extremely comprehensive. But first of all, I'd like to thank the township staff and JL Richards for their help in this application review and preparing it, and obviously their support in the proposed addition. Mr. Chairman, this has been a long journey to get this ready for your review. From the process of started in the August of 2021 with site visits in September by member Jarvis and member Matthews, as well as Councilman Peter Cooper to the site. And then we spent a year conducting environmental studies, peer reviews, and then the rezoning that Jennifer referred to. So we've been doing a lot of homework here. It is all built into, all of what you have just been told is built into this particular bylaw. The addition is supported by the Go Home Bay community. And I believe, Jennifer, or sorry, Marcia, that you received a letter from the Go Home Bay, from the Madawaska Club indicating that. And I believe even Peter Foles may be on this call, who is the chairman of that committee. Also, as you mentioned, our immediate neighbors to the north and south, the Capes and the Owens, are both in support of this. And all other neighbors are over a mile, well, probably just under a mile away. So there aren't very many other people to consult. The township staff has also been on site to review the property and endorse the application. And as I mentioned, we've had visits from Stephen Jarvis and Dave Matthews and Peter Cooper. So I thank the committee for taking the time to consider this application. I hope to win your support.
Thank you, Mr. Wishart. Is there any member of the public that wishes to add comment regarding this application?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, we have a live person.
I'm a live person.
Oh, that's what.
That sounds like Peter Foles.
Could I ask you please to identify yourself and your address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Peter Foltz. My local address is 31835 Georgian Bay Shore.
Is your microphone on? It is.
I believe it is.
Sorry.
I'll move it a little closer. Is that better?
Okay, that's great.
I'm not here in my personal capacity. I'm here today on behalf of the Madawaska Club of Go Home Bay, which is a property owner in its own right, owning several parcels of land in the Go Home Bay community, and is also a cottagers association. I did submit a letter, which I'm assuming you've all received and had a chance to read. In that case, I won't repeat what's in the letter, but I just have a couple of comments I'd like to add, if I may. Particularly for the newer members of the committee. We have what we call a land use planning committee in the Go Home Bay community, and it's made up of 6 members who are from various geographic parts of the community. And our mandate is to review any planning applications that are brought in the Go Home Bay area and to make recommendations to our board of directors for our Cottagers Association in terms of how the Cottagers Association should respond to these applications. And I think this committee brings some objectivity and discipline to the process of reviewing and responding to these applications. Our approach, wherever possible, is cooperative and not confrontational. And in almost all cases, we've been able to arrive at a solution that meets the interests and needs of the applicant and respects the values that are in the official plan with respect to the Go Home Bay waterfront community. Since our community plan was established in 2006, I can tell you that there have been 4 applications of this nature to increase the gross floor area beyond the 200 square meters that is permitted in the zoning bylaw. So that's 4 applications over 17 years. And that says, to me at least, that we've struck the right balance with our zoning and our official plan in relation to gross floor area for our community. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
My only question on that is, just for clarification on your last statement, that you had 4 applications out of the dozens or so that came forward, and how were they resolved?
This is number 4. The first 3 applications were all approved and were unopposed.
Okay, thank you. There may be further questions when we bring them before the committee, so we'll wait until then. Is there any other member of the public present who would wish to offer further comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public session of the portion of this meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we will begin with Member Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to reiterate per the letter given to us by the Madawaska Club. GFA is listed as 200 square meters, but you allow up to 265.
The zoning bylaw specifies 200 square meters. There is a provision in the OP that was put in there at our request that says that the GFA can be increased above 200 square meters through a minor variance application, such as we have here today, up to a limit of 265 square meters.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Member Predco.
Thank you, Chair. So the only question I have, and it's going to get a little bit down in the environmental reports, on page 42 of the Beacon report, there is a figure number 4, which has a little aerial view with the different structures and boundaries on it. And the only one that I just wanted to point out and ask about is the proposed septic location. And that, from what I can see from their report and what they're talking about, is that it's pretty much on the line for the environmental protection zone setback. And just wondering if it could be moved farther away just for safety's sake, or is that environmental protection zone already enough of a buffer that there's no other additional concerns?
Mr. Wishart, looks like you're prepared to answer that question.
Yes. Remember, I was present when the environmentalists were looking at the various septic systems, and the way we are approaching this is we want to make sure that whatever we do is twofold. One is a septic is appropriate for all environmental protection, and second of all, we comply with anything environmental just regardless of what we build. We would like to move it back as far as we can in that specific particular situation, but that site was actually chosen by the environmentalists in conjunction with a septic installer to make sure that we were doing it in a way that there would be no leaching or any risk, because actually the land slopes away from the environmentally sensitive area. And they felt like putting it there would allow the septic system to flow away from it. And that was ideal in their perspective.
Okay, thank you. That's my main observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Predko. Member Schmidt, please.
I had to reopen the letter that you had submitted because I wasn't sure if I had read it incorrectly, but I see that you're supporting this application as well. And I think this all makes sense from my perspective. Thanks for everybody's hard work.
If I may, our official position is we have no objection to the application. and we use that wording deliberately because in the event that there is a contested application within our community, and we have members who are supporting it and members who are opposed to it, we as an organization we tend to take the position that either we are opposed to it or we are not opposed to it, rather than being seen to support it, where some of our members may be opposed.
Respectfully noted. Thank you. Thank you.
That's a good definition for us all to be aware of. Right. No objection. And speaking of no objection, Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wishart, nice to see you. I was just reminiscing that it must be almost 18 months ago since we had the privilege of being on your island. So first of all, congratulations to you for sticking at it and finding a way to make it work from an environmental and within your community. Secondly, I'd just like to thank Mr. Folds for his letter of no objection. It did clear up a couple of concerns that I had, and with your permission, I may pass that no objection comment along to Cognition to you. So otherwise, I would support this and wish you well in the construction stage if it happens.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, I will read the resolution. Moved by Member Jarvis, seconded by Member Schmidt. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A21-32 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 8 Island 3480 to permit the expansion of a legally existing shoreline dwelling for a total GFA of 262 square meters with the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes are paid to date. B, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And C, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Decision unanimous. The motion is carried and the application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.
Very well. Our next and final application that is not subject to public meeting is application B21-08 for 20506 Georgian Bay Shore. To the planner, please.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I have a very, very brief presentation, but I will share my screen. Can everybody see my screen? Thank you. So I'm here to present a change of conditions request for application B2108. Township staff are requesting permission to modify condition of consent B 2108, which this committee previously approved last year in May. One of the conditions required a site plan agreement to implement an environmental impact study. As some of you may know, Bill 23 received royal assent this past November, and it had the impact of taking away the townships and all other municipalities in Ontario's ability to apply site plan control to single detached developments such as this one. So as a result, we're asking committee's permission to change the requirement to enter into a site plan agreement to a requirement to enter into a consent agreement, which you may also hear often called a 5126 agreement. The impact of the change is fairly minor. Both types of agreements are registered on title. However, they are enforced slightly differently. The traditional site plan agreement is other applicable law under the building code. So in that scenario, the CBO, when she's reviewing any building permits, she could look at site plan, and if there was not a compliance issue, could refuse to issue the permit. That's not the case for a 5126 agreement. This type of agreement instead gets enforced by our municipal law enforcement officer instead. However, this is the situation Bill 23 has put us in. So we are recommending approval and hopeful that this will allow the applicant to satisfy the condition. And this is the only outstanding condition. And finally get this consent over the hump. I will stop sharing my screen now, but I'm available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cadet. Madam Secretary, any correspondence on this application?
No correspondence has been received.
Okay, and I don't see any members other than the committee members online at the moment. So there's no need for applicant or public input. So I will bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we will begin with Member Schmidt.
I have no comment. Seems like something more technical in nature. So I'm fine with that.
Thank you. Member Predko.
Thank you. I just have one quick question for Mr. Smith, our planning director. And that is this consent agreement something that is going to be used more frequently in the coming days, weeks, months with Bill 23 versus with the loss of site plan control?
That's a good question. It's a relevant question. And the answer to that is we are looking at the tools that the Planning Act has left us. And in certain cases, maybe not all as in the past, certain cases, we may take advantage of a tool like this that's made available to us. We certainly retain significant concerns over what we're registering. And by that, I mean what we're expected to enforce when we register documents, and making sure that we are able to carry out any enforcement and that it makes sense that we do. So it's still on, I guess, a case going forward basis about where it will apply. And we also have some other opportunities. But the answer to your question is yes, it's available to us.
And from an enforcement perspective, is this more onerous since it's on the by law enforcement officer rather than the building department?
It doesn't change. We still only have certain staff that can enforce. The problem is that we have probably literally tens, 20s, 30s, hundreds of documents that are registered that we have no clue what's in.
Mm-hmm.
So we have made a mess of registering documents that we have really no intention of enforcing because we don't really know what's in them. And some of the provisions are frankly ridiculous that we're expected to enforce. Letters that you're supposed to send to DFO and other places that are embedded in EISs that we have no control over. So we need to be vigilant about what we're registering and our ability to enforce it and our ability to, and that's both from a staff perspective, but also from a practical perspective. We're never going to be able to find whether or not somebody was sent a letter to Department of Fisheries and Oceans on a particular issue in the future. That's patently ridiculous. So we, like I said, it's a tool available. We need to be concerned about what we register, which means when we look specifically at environmental impact studies, that what's within them is a difference between what can be enforced and what we would consider things like best management practices or information to landowners. And that is maybe a change from somewhat of a change from the past.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Member Predko? Okay, thank you. Member Jarvis.
I see this as a housekeeping act, obviously, or issue because of Bill 23. I guess Bill 23's laden our planning department with a significant amount of additional work, which is unfortunate. But I appreciate that they found a way to implement this in some other form, which is good. I thank Jen for her work and David and his crew as well. Other than that, no, bye.
Thank you. Member Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Ms. Gaudette, Jen, I'm just a little confused why this needs to change. I mean, we've had many properties that there were site plan controls on before Bill 23 came in. Are we going to be subject to doing this same consent agreement to all of those? And why is this one happening? Is it because has something changed, or are they running out of time? I'm a little confused on it. I'm clearly not a good planner.
No, it's a fair question, and it's one that we're all, as a profession, trying to figure out right now is what we do, because there were no transition policies in the Planning Act for the loss of site plan. It was here on the 28th, gone on the 29th. So the ones that currently have site plan, nothing's changing for them. Those ones are all, it's still registered on title, it's still there. Where this application comes in is it was approved with a condition from committee requiring site plan. So we're in the position where we need to check those boxes to get this consent, but we no longer can enforce that because the Planning Act doesn't allow us to. And it's hard for us as staff to know when committee made that decision for provisional approval in May. Was one of the factors for approval the condition that these mitigation measures would be registered on title? Which is why we're bringing it forward as a change of conditions request, so that we can get everybody's feedback to say, hey, we still want to maintain the intent of it, but we don't have that tool in the toolbox anymore. For all the other outstanding ones, you may see more of these come up every meeting as we kind of get to them. We're looking at what was approved in the last year that still needs to go through the final conditions, and what has this condition on it, as quite a few do. However, our staffing challenges have made it such that we don't have a comprehensive list of those applications yet. And it may sort of be a case by case where, if there was only one issue that had to be registered on title, one mitigation measure, maybe, we don't need to go through this process. This one had quite a few environmental mitigation measures recommended, and the applicant is really eager to get this one going. So while we're kind of in this legal limbo, we thought this would be the best way to help him move forward and finally get this lot created after over a decade.
So this is because the mitigation hasn't been able to be completed since the May.
Rather that we can't register our own title, which was the original condition that was approved in May.
If I may, Mr. Chair, we are in a technical problem area. We have consents that or approvals out there that require the submission of or the registration of a site plan agreement. And since they're single family, quote unquote, properties, it's not allowed. So we have this option, either the planning staff are going to sign off on them and say, since it's no longer legally possible for us to implement this condition, that we just move forward with that internally and you get your consent. Or in this particular case, we took a look at the extent of the EIS and said, what can we do? And this is why it's in front of you. There may be other ones where we have the similar type of requirement, but where the EIS is actually far less of an issue, I guess you could say, with the development. And I would say last thing here is that this is the ORC property, is that that owner is under no obligation under the current law to register, period. It doesn't apply. The clause is unenforceable on his consent, if you know what I mean. It should be struck out. It should be X through, whatever it is, and moved on since it no longer applies. But in this particular case, they, like a lot of your ratepayers, have a concern about the environment and is willing to have this registered. We may have others that say, no, you can't change the conditions of consent. Those were the ones that were given. So we have a problem in some respects, and we don't have a comprehensive way of dealing with it at the moment. In some respects, again, it's a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I certainly don't want your job, David, or Ms. Godet's job. But I guess I still got a bit of a blank wall as to why the existing site plan that was in place in May is now negated.
I can answer that. So it wasn't actually registered yet.
Oh,
it's in this flux. So we're supposed to be registered, but then the Planning Act took that ability away from us.
okay. So we got caught in the limbo of the changeover. Well, that makes more sense. So I would support this. Does this cover, Mr. Ort had 2 or 3 properties there. Is this covering all of those properties?
So it covers the land proposed to be severed as well as the retained. It does not apply to that lot that was created 10 years or so ago.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Matthews. Again, a quick question before we let you go there. Is the content of the agreement 5126 basically the same as what we had in site plan control, or are there significant differences?
For this purpose, it would be exactly the same.
Yeah, we don't have a true template for it. Section 41 is very specific in actually what you should be allowed to register in terms of what site plan looks like. And I have a feedback somewhere, I'm sorry. EISs are typically, or not typically, EISs were never contemplated. And this is my opinion. EISs were never contemplated to be registered as site plan agreements. Lighting, parking, garbage storage, pavement. Those were the things in site plan. We've kind of taken it and blown it up for many years. But coming back to your question, sorry, Mr. Chair, is that a consent agreement in some respects should theoretically be just a consent agreement. We may be pushing the boundaries again, but what should be in a consent agreement, because that's what we're talking about here, about what is germane to the consent, not germane to the environment and how the property is used, but germane to the consent. So if you want to get into a whole bunch of planning law and all the rest of it, then then we're going to have to go down that road. But at the moment, this is the only tool we have, and we'll see whether or not it survives other any challenges by others about how we would use it.
Okay, there's I see a gentleman on the screen with a helicopter blade over his head. Are you just are you from a foreign nation and there's
yes, and that's my helicopter.
Did you have a comment or something you wish to address the committee, or?
No, I just missed the change from attendee to panelist, and so it finally came up and asked me again, and I misunderstood it. So I've been here. I have no comment other than I think just as somebody who's owned this land for a long period of time, I actually am very supportive of the fact that the environmental impact study is going to be respected and imposed upon any future development. So I think this is a good idea. And otherwise, having owned the property and if it was to ever be developed, then without taking these into account, I think it would be a bit of a travesty, frankly.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. We've had comment from everyone so far, and if there are no further questions from the committee, I will read the resolution. Moved by member Predko, seconded by member Schmidt. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Community of Adjustment hereby modifies the provisional conditions of approval of consent application B21-08 as follows. That existing clause B be deleted in its entirety and replaced with the following. In accordance with section 51, subsection 26 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended, the Ecological Site and Impact Assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, Inc., dated January 6, 2022, and last revised February 28, 2022, shall be registered at the owner's expense against the title of the land, subject to this approval, and the township shall be entitled to enforce said agreements against the owner and subject to the Registry Act and the Land Titles Act against any and all subsequent owners of the land. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The decision is unanimous. The motion is carried and the application is approved. We have a couple more articles of business. And I see here that Madam Secretary has presented us with some new information that we were not available before, and that we are losing another member of our team, a very valuable member, to some foreign entity. So be careful. Well, I think we need to be careful how we address this, but on behalf of the committee, and especially for myself, you have been a tremendous help to me through this whole thing, and keeping me on track and keeping me prepared and so on. And you could have been a little bit more strict with the other members. But we are going to miss your smiling face and wish you all the best in wherever it is you're going. So
Well said.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Who's
So
gonna keep Tom in line?
yeah.
Not sure about that.
That was really subtle.
Yeah. Our final resolution of the day was moved by member Jarvis and seconded by member Matthews. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Community of Adjustment does now adjourn at 1:14 p.m. until March 10, 2023 at 10 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand.